forward to this. And man, I
Likewise, I'm
think
sorry it's taken so long to connect on that, but
I don't know. Hey, life happens.
yeah, for
And
sure.
thank God for technology. We can do this. You're in Michigan, I'm in Texas, and
The
it
studio
was
looks great.
this is actually the saloon.
Nice.
Yeah, it's the 1836 saloon. Travis's father, Dave Roberts. Well, you talked to Dave, right?
Yes, for
Yeah.
sure.
His original one was back in Montgomery County, and then when they sold that place, they moved up here to Groesbeck, Texas, and they built another one. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. We had the some of the cast and crew from the Beast of Trinity, Texas, out here last weekend, and they were blown away. It's a fascinating place.
Yeah, it looks great.
Lots of history, a lot of artifacts from the old South and Texas. And Dave was a prolific collector of Texas museum quality artifacts, especially around the Alamo. And
He was born
in fact,
and raised in Texas.
actually, he was born in Illinois.
Interesting.
And then family moved to Texas when he was real young. And he just loved the whole Texas spirit, the history, everything about Texas. And he became just obsessed with Texas and our history and the Alamo and the cause of freedom and all these different aspects that make Texas so unique. But he loved it, and he everything he's done. And he ended up in bidding wars for Alamo artifacts with, believe it or not, Phil Collins, the entertainer.
Wow, who would have? If you
Phil
asked me to
Collins.
guess 1,000 names, I wouldn't have come up with Phil Collins.
Really weird, right? Phil Collins actually I think he's still alive. Owns the largest private collection of Alamo artifacts on the planet. And he and Dave ended up in some bidding wars for cannonballs and different things and stuff like that. So it's really interesting. And I had the pleasure of going to Gonzales, Texas. That may not ring a bell with you. That may not mean anything to you. It's actually the home of the, I know you've seen the Come and Take It flag.
Yes.
That's from Gonzales, Texas. That was the first shot of the Texas Revolution was Gonzales, Texas. And the Texians owned a cannon there that was given to them by the Mexicans to ward off the Comanche Indian. And then the Mexicans, Santa Ana, said, you guys are getting a little independent-y.
Too big for your britches.
We want our cannon back. And the wonderful, amazing, heroic people of Gonzales, Texas made that flag and waved it at them and said, well, you can come and take it.
Right.
And they tried and they backed off. And then it was the Alamo battle that happened shortly after that. And anyway, Dave donated a piece of artwork, beautiful piece of artwork. I'll send you pictures of it. But anyway, Dave invited me out there to go when he dedicated that art to the city of Gonzales, and they've got an amazing library out there with all kinds of, they have the cannon. They've built a building there that houses the actual Come and Take It cannon. And so I got to spend the weekend out there with Dave, and he presented that. And then he actually spoke. I find it very apropos. This was just a few months before he passed away. He actually spoke on the doorstep of the Alamo there in San Antonio on the anniversary of Texas independence and the beginning of the siege of the Alamo. And it's a real big event they have there every year, and he got to speak and talk about the heroes of the Alamo and Gonzales that sent men to the Alamo when they got the letter, the victory or death letter that was penned by Colonel Travis. And they were the only ones that actually came into the Alamo after the siege began. And of course, they all perished. But yeah, fascinating history. I didn't mean to bore you with all that.
Sure. Oh,
but,
no, I love hearing it because certainly we're not taught it.
No, now in Texas, up until recently, and I think that somebody in Austin, Texas is in real trouble, but part of the curriculum of all public schools in the state of Texas is they teach Texas history. There's an actual course that every child has to go through, but as the state of our public education system continues to deteriorate and destroy young minds and young people, they're eliminating that because, again, the history of Texas and Texas independence flies in the face of government leadership, and
True.
They don't like the spirit of come and take it.
Yes.
So here we are, and that's why, our Dave created the brand, Defiance, and that arm holding the flintlock rifle is that's actually Davy Crockett on the wall of the Alamo in defiance of the Mexican army and Santa Anna and tyranny, and his last great action and show of defiance towards tyranny. And so that's where Defiance comes from. So that's what we're about. We just carry that on, and Travis is doing an amazing job in his father's footsteps, big shoes to fill. And but here we are. And
awesome.
And we keep finding amazing people like yourself that are joining us and writing books, and we have
looking for a home
to publish, and looking for a home, and they come from all over, even Michigan, right? Who'd have thought?
Who would have thought? Probably never even heard of Michigan, huh? that's somewhere near Canada.
Whereabouts? Where on the? It's like that. Whereabouts in Michigan are you?
That is very good, Mark. That's how we do it in Michigan.
I've been there.
Okay.
I love Michigan.
We are about here. So we're about 45 minutes north and west of Detroit.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're fairly close to Detroit then.
Yes. I mean, we're smack dab Motor City area. 2 minutes from my house here is the General Motors Proving Grounds, where they take the General Motors cars around and put them at high rates of speed around the track and test those under all conditions. So that's the Proving Grounds is literally a stone's throw from my house. So, and yet what I find interesting about the state of Michigan, despite being the home of the automobile, we have, I think, probably the most unpaved roads in the state in the country. I've heard, it's amazing how many, when my boys were growing up, and you take them to friend's house and you just wash your car. And of course they live off a dirt road and it rained the day before. And you're like, well, there goes my car wash. But I have no idea why we have so many unpaved roads. We should have the best roads in the country, but
So you're actually saying they're not bad roads, they're unpaved roads.
Oh, both. We have the well, certainly we have the bad roads, but we have a lot of unpaved
roads. Yeah. Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. Now, in defense, in Michigan is a wetter climate. You go out west, it's drier climate, but in Michigan's wetter climate. You guys have brutal winters and the freezing and then all that stuff. That
freezing, thawing
on roads. I don't know how you even, it's just a constant. Am I correct on that?
Absolutely. And it's funny, I just traded in a vehicle, just got a brand new F-150. I owned it 10 days, already got a chip in the window. I mean, everybody's window is chipped and cracked up here because of the bad roads constantly flying up and hitting your windshield. So now, everybody's got this, but we don't have the heat you do, right? So you give a little, you get a little, but
no, I'm telling you, and I tell now, some people, everybody's different, and I get that. But I always tell people it's easier for me to get warm because I can always put on more clothes than it is for me to get cooled off. And I live, down in Texas, and it just gets hotter in Hades and humid and all that. But I don't mind the cold nearly as much. Now the short days are tough.
I'm the exact opposite. The more we're up here, the thinner my skin is getting. And so my wife and I have that argument because she doesn't tolerate the heat well. And she's like, I said, listen, then you just don't go out during the morning. At least even a hot day, you have the cool,
Yeah. Oh
it's
no.
a little
Yeah.
cooler in the morning, a little cool. When it's cold, it's just cold from sun up to sun down.
Sun
So,
down. Right.
but
Are there still a lot of homes up there that are not air conditioned?
no, I think, and I know in our little town, we have a ton of building that's going on here. And it seems like everybody is a home builder around this area. So, and it's one of those things you often hear, oh, Detroit, because that was that was where I wanted to be transferred when I worked with the Bureau. And people are like, you want to go to Detroit? Well, I wanted to be near my wife's family. And, so you think of Detroit and Detroit obviously has its problems, but the suburbs are just phenomenal.
Are
Um,
they really?
yeah, and a lot of lakes, and you get a lot of vacation-y feel because there's so many inland lakes around here, and everybody's got a boat, and everybody, if they don't live on a lake in the lower part of the state, they've got vacation homes up north. So yeah, you get into now some of the older houses, maybe around Flint and downtown Detroit and Pontiac, and some of those, they probably you're relegated to an air conditioner. And some of those, there was a time it was more expensive to buy a VCR than it was to buy some of the houses in these states. I mean, or in these cities, you could buy a home for $2,500,
Right.
$3,000, something like that. So yeah, those certainly don't have air conditioning, but everything it's probably you're experiencing a population boom down there or a building boom down there. I don't know what happens to all the old houses, but everybody seems to be moving into new homes.
So what is the industry that's driving the new construction? I mean, is the car industry back? What's going on?
Yeah. I mean, it's never really left. And it's funny because everybody around our area is an engineer. We have friends
Oh,
that, her entire job is she has worked on seat belts for her entire career and talk everything to each their own, I guess, but I cannot imagine focusing my entire life on a seatbelt. My father-in-law spent 39 years with Ford and spent a huge portion of the time working on gas tanks. And so you can often when you meet an engineer, through coaching your kids' sports or something like that, you tend to find they are very focused. They're very good at what they do. They don't see big picture all the time, but they can pick out things that you and I would never even notice, because that's their job. They're focused
so
on the minutia.
interesting.
And so yeah, certainly around this area, it's the motor, and everybody either works for the car companies or works for a business that supports the car industry.
So interesting. Detroit has such an amazing history. I use it as an example, oftentimes talking about the concepts of freedom and what happens when freedom's lost, and people are surprised to hear that back in the especially the 50s and 60s, Detroit was per capita the wealthiest city in the world.
For sure. And
It was.
it's funny, we spent a lot of time vacationing in Florida, and it's amazing how many Michiganders end up in Florida.
Yeah.
And the reason they do, it kind of makes sense, is you were working, you all had good jobs that paid good money, a lot of vacation time, and the weather was so miserable in the winter that the only place you could go to get warm weather is down south. So you tend to get this huge transplant population down in Florida from Michigan, because again, they had the vacation time, they had the income. And one thing I noticed when I first moved here and met my wife and first moved to Michigan, they're very good at entertaining themselves. Motorhomes, boats, motorcycles. I heard it's in the top of all the states for golf courses. So, but again, I think that comes with, working for the car companies, is you had the disposable income that a lot of other places like Philadelphia, where I grew up, or some of the other East Coast cities probably didn't have that level of industry as some of the car company locations did. So
You grew up in Philadelphia.
just outside of,
Where? Because I lived when when I was in junior high, what we would call junior high back then, when they still had junior high. My dad was transferred, And we lived outside of Philadelphia in a little town called Exton.
My dad used to work in Exton. So
Stop.
I grew up in Norris.
No way.
Yeah.
Because Exton's for folks that are tuning in. I don't know what Exton is today, but back then, all Exton had was a mall. It was one of the first malls up in that area, and there was the King of Prussia Mall, but Exton had a mall. And where we lived was we were in the country. I mean, that's not very far from Lancaster, from Amish country,
right? And Tullytown and all of those towns.
Yeah. Oh, my side yard, whatever. We backed up to big cornfields, and my backyard was woods for as far as you could see, and it was beautiful. It was beautiful. It was an amazing place. It's grown up now. I don't think it's anything like that anymore. I think it's probably
and my father worked for a concrete plant that dealt with sewers. You know, they made the giant sewer lines and things like that. So it certainly has the that blue collar type industry there. But yeah, that's funny. Yeah,
Exton. You've got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
That is what a small.
Be careful who you talk about, Mark. You never know, right?
Right? No kidding. So, how old were you when you lived in that area in Pennsylvania?
So I was born and raised in Norristown. I joined the Army right after high school, and after the Army, came back home, spent 4 years of college, and was never back there again. So my family all still lives out that way. I'm the only one who has escaped. And that's where you talk about Michigan. As you know, I remember moving, coming out to Michigan for the first time to visit my wife, who was then my girlfriend. And I said, my goodness, your surface streets, which you guys are familiar with Texas, obviously, but your surface streets are bigger than our expressways, because we've got like the Schuylkill Expressway, and they're about that wide. And then you come out here and you get to the Midwest and you feel you can breathe a little bit because we're not all cloistered on the East Coast anymore. So yeah, I was born and raised in that area. Matter of fact, just stopped watching the Eagles game to come speak with you. So, and luckily I raised my Michigan children as Eagles fans. So at least I've done one thing right as a parent.
So because I remember I got into hockey. We moved from Houston up there, and then they only lasted 3 years, and they said we got to get back. But I really got into hockey, and the Philadelphia Flyers. Oh, Bobby Clark, Bernie Perron.
Back in the Broad Street Bullies era.
Oh man, I mean, crazy. But I loved it. That was I did love that. That was it gave me an appreciation. In fact, hockey is the only sport that if I ever watch sports, what I very rarely do, is probably hockey.
Yeah,
it's an amazing sport.
It's definitely a sports town, which is fun. Yeah, as long as you're on the right side. You don't want to be on the wrong side at the stadium. But
no, what was the great movie about Nick? What was it called? It was a Disney movie.
Invincible.
Vince Papale. Yeah. What are they? Invincible.
Invincible. Yeah.
Great movie. I don't know how much of that was. I mean, it's based on a true story, obviously, on Vince Papale, but there was a lot of true components to that. And I remember a scene where the wife was talking to the coach, said, "Sweetie, this is the same crowd and I just started dying laughing because I go, that's Philly.
That's true. But the nice thing about that area, you never have to worry what's on their mind. Nobody's ever going to talk about you behind your back because they're probably going to tell you to your face prior to it.
It's a rough crew.
And you know what? They're salt of the earth people. And I know Norristown, growing up in Norristown, either half the town was black or half the town was Italian. And and just it was good people. And still is, obviously demographic shift and things like that. But just good salt of the earth people. But like I said, you never have to worry if they're talking about you behind your back because they're not. They told you to your face about 20 minutes ago. So exactly.
So then you're growing up in that area and knowing now a little bit about your father. Is that where your values were formed, or is that something that happened later? I mean, because obviously you ended up in law enforcement. You've already mentioned you went in the Army. So were you were you raised in pretty traditional value type home, a tight family?
Yeah,
Where did that
100%.
come from?
Yeah, what's interesting is both of my parents were extremely poor growing up. My father was uh his mother and father were never married. He was one of three and then had a step brother or a half brother from one of his dad's affairs. His dad was very abusive and they were just broke, kind of small farmer type people. And then my
Where was
mother,
that at?
yeah,
Where
it was like Trooper, Pennsylvania, Norristown,
oh,
just
okay.
outside of
Okay.
Norristown.
So farming, kind of the
Yeah, for
rural.
sure. And again, you're figuring my dad was, so you're talking late 1930s, early
Yeah.
1940s.
Yep. Mhm.
And then my mother grew up in Western Pennsylvania in a small coal mining town of about
No kidding.
450 people, which is funny because when I joined the FBI, one of my instructors, talk about being in a small town, he said to me, or he was teaching the class, and he said, "Hey, I grew up in a small coal mining town in Western Pennsylvania," and talked. So in between the breaks, I went up and I spoke to him. I said, "Hey, what town are you from?" He goes, "You've never heard of it." I said, "Well, my mother grew up in Western Pennsylvania. What was the name of the town?" And he's like, "Trust me, you've never heard of it." And I finally, he said, "Jerome." And I said, "You're not going to believe this. My mother's from Jerome." I mean, there's only 400 people in the town, 450 people. And his first comment was, "We have sewers now." And I said, "Well, congratulations." I mean, that was 1998, but last horse finally crosses the finish line. But so my mother, conversely, grew up in a very religious Catholic family, one of 10, but he was
Mhm.
a coal miner. So they didn't make much money. And
Oh
then when
man.
two poor people meet each other and start having kids, not surprising, my parents weren't very wealthy. But my dad was always, and he tells the story when he was in the Marine Corps during the Korean War, and he was stationed in Japan. And he said he used to pray
Hit the
every night
five.
that God would find him a wife. And he said he found Jesus and he gave his life to Jesus when he was in the military. And so we grew up Lutheran, going to church every Sunday, all of us,
No
because
kidding.
I was one of five. We were all acolytes and, helped do the collections. And my father helped, he was the treasurer for the Sunday school and all of those things. So between my mom's values as a Catholic and growing up in a very religious Catholic family, and then my father being Lutheran, we kind of grew up with God as part of our lives. So um, definitely, I think the morals came from that. Obviously, it's hard to get away from
Yeah.
the role that religion has in shaping your morals. And then my parents were just always good people, and um, like I said, we're one of five kids,
Hardworking, just
hardworking,
very.
and that's kind of in one of the books I wrote. I kind of paid a little bit of homage to them from the standpoint they went through a devastating bankruptcy when I was about 14 years old and lost everything. And then
Oh,
pulled my younger brother and I in front at the dinner table and said, "Hey, just to let you know, we have no money left. We have nothing left, but we'll always love you." And that commenced this whole process of, for the next several years, they just worked and slaved until they paid every bill off. And so I grew up knowing that hard work because I had excellent role models who did it. And they were just parents who worked their fingers to the bone. And which is why my dad's 92, and that's why we had to be delayed. And I know you and I had made earlier plans, but he
oh,
is he
yeah.
is we just had to place them in hospice a couple or in he's been on hospice for about a year, but we just had to place them in a senior assisted facility. And he's not doing great. He's 92, but the parts are just starting to wear out. So it's hard to see this once proud man who's now having to be changed and taken care of and all of those. So it's tough, as anybody knows with parents. It's tough raising parents, I guess, Mark, is what I'm saying. But when you start seeing the wheels come off, that gets sad.
But
But
the
yeah,
legacy, his legacy is obviously amazing, and he's raised some great kids. Are you close to your brothers and sisters? I'm assuming brothers.
yes, yeah, all of them are out there yet. But and the nice thing about here, we thank goodness, it's amazing the things that God gives you. Where over the years we were bringing my parents out and they would stay for us for weeks, months at a time. So it was great, despite living almost 700 miles away from them. My boys grew up knowing them as part of their
Oh, that's
lives,
all.
which is great because that's, when you start working for the federal government, you get transferred to other locations, things like that. It becomes difficult to maintain family relationships. But I remember when I first joined the Army, my mom said to me, you know what, you don't have to be near each other to be close. And she was exactly right. So proximity doesn't mean closeness. So.
Wow. You know, that's what we're missing today in the country that used to be pretty common. What you just described as your upbringing, that used to be really nothing amazing. That was just like, that's how
Yeah.
most people, at different levels of struggle and different levels of income, obviously, and stuff. But, um, you know, folks were raised with hardworking parents, or with a value on a lot of times religion, a lot of times with family and closeness and tight knit and traditional values. And boy, we got away from that. But I know, I can tell just by talking to you that you really are appreciative and place a lot of value and know how fortunate you were to be raised in a family.
And that's part of it, right? Is that level of appreciation. And
Oh,
my dad always used to wear a pin when he worked, and it said attitude. And that was his
oh man.
approach. You need to have an attitude of gratitude. And I think that's lost to a lot of people. Things just become expected when you're given things and you become used to that, then you come to expect it. And then you get this entitled type of mentality. So, but yeah,
Very dangerous.
we need to get back to some of those things. And I think there's a shift that's coming. I've often said, I'm looking at my boys, one's 16, one's 20. I think they're the generation that's going to kind of turn things back around, because I see a lot of increase in religiosity, a lot of increase in patriotism, a lot of interest in politics, things like that. So I think that's going to be the shift that we're going to see with this youngest generation now.
Boy, you said a mouthful there. We've seen a lot of things in the last couple of weeks with assassination of Charlie Kirk, and I don't think I've ever heard Jesus' name in a positive way more in my entire life. I mean, on all different media, on shirts, it seems, and it's not even in a, like a fashionable way. I watched Charlie Kirk's memorial service last week, and I'm watching people there. I guess the legitimacy of people having an encounter with Christ, it doesn't seem superficial. There is
It feels heartfelt, I think, is what, and I think there's a revival coming.
I gotta tell you, and more than anything, that's what America needed. Now, I don't, it's heartbreaking that it would take such a horrible event of what we all witnessed for something like that to happen. But aren't we as human beings, that's just like us? We're just, until something horrible happens, we just duty. We're on our, and just
not paying attention. Yeah.
And then something like that makes us stop. My prayer is that this continues. And I agree with you. My kids are a little bit older than yours. My son is 30, and he owns a business, and they do pretty good. And I attended an event they had for their employees a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of his employees and business partners, stuff like that, they're all about the same age group. And I noticed that all of them, and it's about 4, 5, 6 couples, all in that range, mid-20s to late 20s, that type of thing. Man, they've all got at least 2 or 3 kids. They're planning on having 5 or 6. They, all of them are Christians, not just by what's on a dog tag. I mean, they're actually, I mean, they're Christians. They live a life, as Christians, and they're having all these kids and very traditional values. And I'm just like, man, it is encouraging. I wouldn't have thought it from our youngest generation, but it seems like actually younger than my kids, your kids' generation. I don't know what is that I don't even, I've lost track of
the Gen Z. I think Gen Z.
Yes. Is that the one? But they seem to be the ones that
I can tell you this. We just went to the football game, the high school football game on Friday night. And it was, I forget what they call it, but it was like America night. So
really? What?
It was called like America night. And so they honored at the start of the game, they had some veterans walk onto the field with the colors. They played the national anthem. They played taps. As they were playing taps, a Chinook helicopter flew over the stadium. And Michigan's big with football. It's not Texas big with football, but this is just a local high school of about 3,000 kids. And all the kids are dressed up in red, white, and blue and wearing the red, white, and blue Rocky shorts. And kids dressed up as Trump and Captain America and carrying American flags. And, it's great to see. I think it's making a comeback.
And Michigan is not known to be a bastion of conservative.
It is not. It is not.
Right. I mean, it's
I know our area tends to be a little, our little town tends to be a little more conservative. And Michigan's one of those that kind of vacillates back and forth. But I think this younger generation is, and if you think about it, every generation at some point revolts against the generation before it. And I think their revolt is moving back towards those traditional values that you mentioned and back towards Christianity or religion or pride in your country and faith in your country. And it's amazing. I'm seeing kids, a kid that I taught or I coached baseball for, and mom and dad were engineers, and both he and his sister are both at the Air Force Academy now. And you're seeing a lot of kids enrolling in the military and things like that. And I think it's I hate to put it this way, but I think it's hip again to be patriotic and to love your country. So that's why I say I think this generation is going to kind of right the ship.
I think they're also bright enough to see their unfortunate, a lot of their parents, or maybe even more like their grandparents, people my age group, maybe in, their great grandparents, and they kind of see kind of the mess they made.
Right.
And they're kind of like, what were you all thinking? I mean, and that's okay. That is okay. I don't see that as being disrespectful. I actually see that being very healthy because they're right. I mean, we look at the boomer generation, which I'm part of. I'm the last year. I'm 1964. That produced the Clintons and the Obama. All these, not the Obamas, but like the Clintons and all these left-wing lunatics, the Woodstocks, and these crazy nutty that introduced all this. They were all driven by the Communist Party and all this kind of stuff, but really jolted our entire country and our culture into a left. Here we are,
right,
and that's what we started. Sure. It's and I think a lot of it was and I've heard people describe that as the greatest generation gave birth to the worst generation, and it's pretty, when you think about it, I've heard it described like this: the kids that grew up during the Depression ended up fighting in World War II. And they lived incredibly difficult lives. And when they came back from the war, they were like, man, we don't ever want our kids to go through what we went through. In other words, the struggle.
Right.
And they just said, we want to give our kid, and they had the ability to give their kids stuff that no generation had ever. And they just, hey, whatever you want, this and that. And you said something earlier about when you get entitled and you think you're owed these things. And without the struggle is what creates the good stuff. It's Absolutely. The fire that creates Absolutely. The iron. It's the pressure that creates the diamond. But as parents, it's very difficult. We don't want to see our kids
hurt. Right. Yeah.
trouble. Yeah.
You
You
struggle
have
to
this,
make sure they're not hurting, and
yeah.
that's not always what's best for them. So
No, I think that I think that between what Brokaw called the greatest generation, that they came back, they did it all right when they're growing up, and when they came back, and all of a sudden America is just going through this economic boom, and the technology and all these things. It was the perfect storm, and they just were, giving their kids stuff and trying to make their lives easier. And
well, it's kind of the first generation too, if you think about it, where children weren't just viewed as assets for the farm, right?
that's right.
They weren't there. They weren't just, hey, they're more hands to work our fields. They were the first one where now we're no longer living on farms. We're living in communities and subdivisions and things like that. So, which spares up a lot of free time for young people. And sometimes idle hands are the devil's playthings.
And they are, but it's not just for kids; it's for adults too.
For sure.
And when we're not struggling, and when we're not in getting away from an agrarian society, I think there is something about living on the earth and not in a concrete. People that are planted in the earth, and they whether it's animal husbandry or growing crops or there's something about that I think, as we've moved away from it, we're now seeing, this homesteading thing where young people like your kids' age, my kids' age, their dream is to get them 10 or 15 acres out and, away and having a farm and being more self-reliant and raising their kids and homeschooling and homesteading. And I got to tell you, I'm encouraged by that, because I truly believe in my heart of hearts that is part of it. That's a huge part of it. I really believe that. And then you're more reliant on your family members. The kids are relying on the parents are relying on the kids. I don't see any problem with that. I think kids
struggle. It's now intergenerational. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. And so hopefully we're getting back to that. Yeah, I agree. And anyway, we're, you and I, we met through Defiance Press, and correct. You submitted a manuscript. How long ago was that the first book?
Is that 2022? I think 3 years ago.
3 years ago, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Rethinking the False Confession Phenomenon. Yeah, you submitted your manuscript. That was the first time we spoke, right. And I was really intrigued because you're, well, first of all, and for those listening, and I'm going to post Brad's bio. It's quite impressive. It's kind of funny because when I was in school, I tell everybody that I made the upper half of the class happen.
Everybody has a role to play, Mark.
Right? I mean, hey, it's hard to be in the upper half if there ain't if there ain't a lower half, right? Right. And I tell people, I say, hey man, I graduated with honors. I knew two of them personally. Some people graduated summa cum laude. I graduated oh my laude. And I just schooling. What's funny, I've always loved to learn. I love to learn now. I love reading. I love studying. I love all these different things, but I hated school. Just everything about it. The sitting in class, the structure, in fact, I got so tired of it all, and I just got so fed up with people telling me what to do. As soon as I turned 18, I joined the Marine Corps. So that'll tell you real quick how smart I am.
They don't tell you what to do there.
No, I'll show you guys. I'm joining the Marine Corps. Okay. Right.
They never yell. They never tell me what to do.
They won't. Yeah. I'm sick of all these people telling me what to do. So, I just share that with you to let you know, I've never been accused of being a mental giant, but one of the things, with that being said, I'm fascinated by people who are good at all this stuff, that made excellent grades, the engineers, the doctors, these, because their brains are so different than mine, and I'm fascinated by it. I just
Well,
am
and that's it's
totally
funny,
fascinated.
Mark, what you're saying too, because and yeah, what I joined the Army like at the same age that you joined, and I did well in high school and got good grades. And but I was just I've had another same thing. I hated school. I didn't like it.
Did you really?
I was absolutely terrified of going to college because I'm the fourth of five. None of my siblings ever went to a 4-year university. I had one sister get her associate's degree, but there was no blueprint in our family for going to college. The only one we had is my father got his bachelor's degree over the course of 9 years. He got tired of running forklifts and he decided I'll start going to college. So it took him 9 years in the making, but God love him, he eventually got his bachelor's degree.
That's amazing.
But I
Good
absolutely didn't want to go to college. So I was the same. I've made that same joke, despite us being separated by the years and the distance between us. Same thing. People were asking my mom at high school graduation, why is he joining the Army? Like he got good grades. Like what? And I just had no interest in schooling. I figured I would retire from the military. I had no interest in attending college. And quite frankly, I was terrified of the fact because I grew up on those 80s movies, and I kind of thought, well, college is going to be everybody drinking, smoking. I'm going to get stuffed in a locker. But for whatever reason, I just got in my head, I'm afraid of college. I don't want to go. Like you, I thought, oh, yes, the Army will be less scary than college. And after a couple of years of that, I'm like, I think I'm ready to go to college now. So sometimes it's where you find that motivation in life, right? So, but yeah, I despite having advanced degrees, that was something that came later in my life. That was not something that I hit the ground running on that. But
Interesting. What was your MOS when you went in the Army? What did you sign up for?
infantry, even better. Yeah.
Did you really?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty common when you talk to Marine, because Marine Corps is mostly infantry. I mean, it's just,
Right.
But the Army, there's a million
different things. Yeah.
Million different jobs. But you signed up for
for the infantry. I said, if I'm going to be in the service, I don't want to push papers. If I'm going to do this, I want to do this. So I went infantry. So,
and okay, what year was that?
So I went in 89. So
89.
Now what's interesting there, and I kind of talk about that in my second book, I got my first assignment because they told me I would stay in Georgia because I went through the infantry schools at Fort Benning, Georgia.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, well, I was at 2. They said, if you're going to go infantry, we have a special. It's only 2 years, 14 weeks. And I said, well, can't I just sign up for 20 years? And my mother said, he'll take the 2 years, 14 weeks. So they're like, they gave me some good math. 2 is a lot shorter than 4 if you don't like it. So I enlisted, and despite being told that I would stay in Georgia by my recruiter, because it's horrible to be the first person in the military who's ever been lied to by his recruiter. I hold that with a lot of, the first one ever, Mark.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Sergeant something. I don't know.
I remember mine, Sergeant Johnson.
Oh yeah.
I remember. Oh yeah.
So they tell you a lot of things, but I ended up in Berlin. Was my first assignment.
Not bad, not shabby.
No, not terrible.
Not for the infantry.
There a month after the wall began to fall. So talk about being the most influential time period to be in Berlin, Germany. It's just as the Berlin Wall began to tumble. So
what were some of the things that you personally witnessed? I mean, talk about a monumental time.
Well, it was funny because, my generation, we were still at the end of the Cold War. So we, even as you think of movies and things like that, the enemy was always the Soviet Union. There was no terrorism. Not like today, terrorism is the biggest concern, but back then it was the Soviet Union. I mean, Rocky Balboa is fighting, the Russians, Drago, and all of them. The enemy was always the Russians. And so we got there, and it was interesting to see the giant holes that were cut into the Berlin Wall. and you could literally see Soviet soldiers looking at us, which was kind of an interesting thing because as you go through basic training, probably same thing with you, that's who we were trained to kill,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
And especially being
Yeah.
in Berlin, that's the enemy. So it was kind of like being in a reverse zoo because you're looking at them, they're looking at you. Their job is to kill you. Your job is to kill them. And here you are just looking at each other and you're thinking, he doesn't really look that different than I am.
Like,
But
right. Yeah.
you saw, yeah. So it was, but at the same time, we still had the KGB driving around in
Oh,
their
yeah.
little black sedans, and they were still had the instructions that when you picked up the phone to call home, make sure you say hello, Boris. And that way, when they're because we know the phones are probably tapped, you're telling
Yeah.
them, hey, that you're wasting your time on me because I've got operational security. So don't waste your time, Boris. So it was kind of interesting from that standpoint that the Cold War was still going on there, but you could
Yeah.
see it beginning to fall at that same time. So kind of fascinating.
Okay. Question. How big of an influence did the movie's Stripes have on you?
Stripes, not as much.
No, really?
Surprisingly, and I have to say, and I actually talk about that in the second book I wrote with Defiance, is we grew up in the 80s. We grew up on movies. A lot of kids don't have that anymore. There's no good movies anymore. But
No, there's not.
and everything,
Great movies.
and it
Oh,
was
John
Stallone
Hughes,
and
Stallone.
Schwarzenegger and Steven Seagal and Jean-Claude Van Damme and all of these action heroes, Bruce Willis, Mel Gibson. And
Yeah.
what was interesting is they were all patriotic
Yep.
and they were all unapologetically male and they were
Yep.
just good. There's no, there was no Sopranos back then where you find yourself rooting for the bad person, or there's no Breaking Bad, or I'm watching the show Animal Kingdom now on Netflix, where you find yourself rooting for the bad person. Back then, it was only good people, and America was good. The heroes were male, and they all were unapologetically good guys. So I would be lying if I said those movies didn't impact my sense of patriotism, where my family obviously gave me the sense of morals and ethics. I think that patriotism was what motivated me for the military, and that patriotism came from the movies that were going on back then. My biggest one I'd probably say was Red Dawn, because that
Oh,
came out. That was the
yes.
first.
Now you're talking
I
about.
was
Come
13
on,
when
man.
that came out, and that was the first.
Wolverines.
Yeah, and that was it. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to fight for my country. So.
And then you had Rambo, right, the early '80s,
Yep.
which, I mean, all the guys in, basically my age, we wanted to be John Rambo, man.
No,
That
for
was
sure.
that was just the coolest, neater than 13 different color popsicles, man.
And it was testosterone, and it wasn't home for boys. And sadly, you watch movies now, and every hero is a woman, and she's 5'2", and she's 100 pounds, and she's kicking the butt of 6'5" battle tested
Navy SEALs.
Yeah. And sadly, it's really I feel sad for my sons that they just don't have that aspect from Hollywood anymore.
Yeah, and it's important, and it's funny you say that because, and I tell people this, and I make feminists really angry. Feminists hate me. Ladies really like what I have to say, but feminists hate me because I would say, these movies and TV shows where you just described it, this 104-pound female, 5'5", 104 pounds soaking wet, and she's gonna beat up a Delta operator that's 6'4", 240 pounds of twisted steel, and just kicks his butt all over the place. And I'm like, this is what gets women hurt. Because the message is to ladies is, hey, go get you some jiu-jitsu classes, get your blue belt in Chick Fu or whatever it is. And now you can go jogging at 4:00 in the morning. You can, go wherever you want, whatever, because you're a blue belt in jiu-jitsu and you can take on. And this is why we are seeing so many females being attacked. And I scratched my head when I was a Houston cop. I worked, the district I worked in was also included the medical center in Houston. And so I worked night shift. And back then, I think they do it totally different today. But if a sexual assault victim came into one of the major hospitals there, like either Herman or most of, Ben Taub, the emergency rooms there, trauma centers there, and the medical center, they obviously would call the Houston Police Department. Houston Police would dispatch a unit over there to take a report and collect the evidence, the rape kit. We call them rape. I don't know what they call them today. Anyway, and I don't know how many victims I interviewed over the years that I worked down there. It was a bunch. It was a bunch. And there was one thing, and it's always stuck with me. The one statement every single sexual assault victim that I interviewed, without an exception, every single one of them made this comment at some point in the interview, which, by the way, I cannot tell you how uncomfortable that was. Hated, it. Like I said, I think they do it different today. I think they send plainclothes female officers now to do those interviews because, are you kidding me?
Right.
Send me, in a little room in this horrible. Right?
We've wised up a little bit from that standpoint for sure.
Oh my God. I'd hate it. And, but the comment every single one of them made at some point in the interview was, I never thought this would happen to me. And I tell that story to anybody that'll listen, because I tell them, I said, look, your best defense as a female is not get yourself in a situation where that can possibly happen. Your pepper spray is not going to help you.
Right.
If you have a gun, it's in your purse. There's a 99% chance that you're going to get disarmed. Your chick foo is not going to work.
Well, and then what's a natural argument? Oh, so you're blaming the victim.
Exactly.
And that's designed to shut down conversation. Exactly. No, I'm not saying to blame the victim. I'm just saying protect yourself. Don't put yourself into those situations,
What I normally respond when they do that, when they blame me of victim blaming, I give them this hypothetical. I said, let me give you a hypothetical situation. Let's just say, because they'll say, well, I have every right to go jogging at 4 a.m., in Memphis. Yeah, you're right. You have every right. You have every right to do that. You knock yourself out. I have every right to fly over to Australia, drive up to the Northern Territories, and say, I'm going to swim every river in the Northern Territories. I have every right to do that. Right? Don't I?
By constitutional standards, yes.
I can fly over there. I can drive up, find somebody, a guide, get me out. I want to swim every river in the Northern Territories of Australia. And when I get eaten by a 20-foot estuarine crocodile, Brad, what are you going to think about me?
Why are you swimming in the Northern Territories in the rivers of Australia? Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's where we tend to get an arrogance of, hey, I should be able to do what I want. And yes, in a perfect world, we should be able to do what we want. But unfortunately, there's bad people out there that roam the world, and it's really like kind of putting your mouth in the head of the lion. So
yes,
I should be safe. Well, that's okay, but you're tempting fate.
Exactly. And so that had a major effect on me in my short stint as a police officer, but that has always stuck with me. And I watched that, and I would oftentimes leave those interviews in the situation a lot of times they were young ladies had found themselves in, where you just leave, you're scratching your head going, you're not saying this to them. Obviously, this is after you leave, and you're driving away, because it was just not just as emotional. It was very emotional for me, because you're interviewing this young lady and they're shattered. They're shattered. And you leave out of there, and a lot of times you're going, what were you doing? What were you
Right.
thinking? Why? This was
Right.
so avoidable. And, but, and I know you, so tell me about you go in the Army, you're in West Germany, you're there right after the wall has come down, an amazing time. We had great movies, man. We're watching Rambo and Rocky and, Commando with Arnold
Oh, for
Schwarzenegger, and, you
sure. Yeah,
know,
for sure.
Die Hard with Bruce Willis, and manly men and masculinity, and, and men were men and ladies were ladies. By the way, I'm very, because words mean things. I'm very particular about who I call a man. I use the term male a lot,
Right.
or effeminate male, or the term that I've coined personally. I should copyright it or trademark it, but post-pubescent boys. We're overrun in this country by males, by post-pubescent boys, effeminate males, adult males. I said, where are the men?
For sure.
Where are the men? And and I think people look at me weird, and I'm being dead serious. Where are
and where did that come from? It's the toxic masculinity, right? It's when
of course
masculinity
the
became
feminist
toxic,
movement just
and
destroyed it. Yes, and we're generations deep now, where we have raised strong, independent girls and sweet boys.
yes,
Generations now, this has been going on,
yes,
and now look where we're at. Girls are going, where are the men? And then they're the ones that are out earning, and then the guys are going, where are the ladies?
right.
And
Well, and it's funny because then and my wife has often said, like, I want a man. I want, like,
of
hair
course,
and sweat and somebody who's going to
yeah.
protect me. And
Protect
there's
and
nothing
provide.
wrong with that. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
There's nothing there is, stereotypes generally exist for a reason. And, you kind of talk, part of the reason that those rape victims bothered you so much is because, like you,
Oh,
or like me, you were raised. Our job is to protect women. We're to protect our
yes.
mothers and our sisters and our wives and girlfriends. Hopefully not wife and girlfriend at the same time.
Right.
But
No.
we're designed, we're geared that way to do that. So once you take that venom out of the snake, you're really kind of taking away man's essence for existence, right?
Exactly.
And now I think there's a generation of women that have found, clearly they've found, because these young people aren't hooking up as readily or as easily as it used to be. I think you've now changed the dynamic of what a man is, and you found out, wow, I'm really not that fond of what's left over.
No. It's
And
horrible. We are, yeah. And let's face it. I mean, it's by design. I mean, that's
for
what the
sure.
devil has done, and it's been gradual, and it's taken time, and it's just, we see it in academia. I think, none of this could have been done without public education, and it's all interwoven, and it's very subtle, and it's very, it comes in the form a lot of times of being egalitarian, and, well, we need to be fair, and, we got to be, what,
Which has to be
and
about the worst word I think that exists in the English language is fairness.
yeah.
And how did we grow up? When we told our parents that's not fair, we
Oh,
always heard the same thing. Life's not fair,
life's
right?
not fair.
Right. And there's this constant belief that you can make things fair, and they're just not. There's people that I'm going to be better at certain things than they are, and they're going to be better at certain things than I am. And I'm never going to be at my height able to play basketball in the NBA.
Right.
I'm okay with it. Then what you do is you go out and find out what you're good at, but it can't be, then we have to lower the standards for NBA basketball so that Brad can play.
Right.
So I think fairness was a killer once we started looking at things, because think about it. The antelope is fast and the lion eats the antelope. And just because you can turn around and from an academic standpoint say, from this point forward, we're going to call the lion a lion and we're going to call the antelope a lion. So now they're both equal. they're just not. They're
No,
just
totally different.
and I think we got away from realizing that our differences and accepting them to now pretending there is no difference. And I think that's where the devil really lurks, is that belief is that, everything's the same, everything's equal, or more importantly, everything can be equal. It just can't. It doesn't work that way. And once you realize, hey, men are different than women. And let me say this, I think women are phenomenal. Like and I've joked, and I always worked around women with the FBI and things like that. And I remember on our floor, it was just two of us polygraph examiners and then some ladies that worked in the evidence room. Well, the evidence room was right outside the kitchen we shared. And I used to come back to my partner and say, my God, women are awesome. Like, you go in there and they've got little decorations up. They've got a rug.
Exactly.
Women make everything better and nicer and
They're trying to create a home. They create home.
And it's just innate.
It's
and if
natural.
it was up to me and my sons, we'd be cold, dirty, and hungry within a day of my wife leaving on vacation without us. And that's okay to realize, like, I can't do what my wife does. And at the same point, my wife realizes I can't do the things you do. But sometimes that's the Velcro, right? That's the hook in the loop that keeps us together, is those differences, and realizing it's okay. We don't have to be the same. And
when did you got to think, and again, you got to give the devil credit in that he was able, it's not a matter of are men better than women or women better than men. That is a stupid argument. It's a stupid statement. It has nothing to do with any of that. I think men are useless without women and women are useless without men. And it's not a matter of equality. It's not a matter about who's better. Here's something else I'll do. And it's meant to demonstrating absurdity by being absurd. And I'll make the comment because I'll often hear women say, being a mother is the hardest job in the world. And I'll say, I'm sorry, I can name 20 jobs right off the top of my head right now that are way harder than being a mother. And of course, they just lose their minds.
Right.
And then their simp husbands, they lose their minds, and everybody's losing their minds except for me. And I'd say, now, wait a second, think about this. And I'll go through it. And I said, now, with that being said, we've established now being a mom is not the hardest job in the world. I will then turn around and say, I can make a really good argument that being a mom is the most important job in the world. And there's a difference.
Agreed.
And I truly believe that the hand that rocks the cradle. And how in the world did the devil pull this off? That he convinced women that being a mother and a homemaker and a wife is less than. Well, how the heck did he ever pull? There's nothing more miraculous, nothing more incredible than a female, a lady that can turn a house into a home, that can bring peace, give birth, bring forth life. And we don't value that?
Right.
Unbelievable.
Well, and you know where that I think started? I think no fault divorce.
Yes.
I think that's
no
when
doubt
we realized. And once I think you've got certain aspects of the government that decided, you know what, if we can tear apart the nuclear family,
bingo,
if we make men believe that women believe that we don't need men, then we can do it on our own. And
absolutely.
Which I think is the biggest lie that sadly women have been told, because I think you can't do it all by yourself. I can't do it without my wife. My wife can't do it without me.
And they can't do it all either. Women can't do it.
No.
Nobody can do it all. A man can't give birth and then be the provider and the protector. It'd be ridiculous on its face to even suggest that. But then why do we tell women, oh, you can do it all? No, they can't. Nobody can.
And that's, my wife often says, that's probably the biggest lie that women's
Yes.
liberation movement ever told us, is
Oh,
that
the
you can
feminist
do it
movement.
all and you can
Yes.
have it all. But once you start doing that, and what you've kind of said, Mark, as we've been talking, is this gradual erosion of everything. We get rid of the religion, we get rid of family, we get rid of all of these different things that kind of have been traditional ways of thought. We get rid of patriotism. We make people start feeling bad about their country and about their history. Well, you start tearing all of these things away, and what you have left is a group of people who are now unable to do it themselves, and now they're dependent on the government.
Bingo.
Right. So that's what it
Now
all
the government's the daddy. Now the
Right.
government's the husband.
For sure.
Now there you go.
Well, I mean, I'm
That's it.
not sure it was the devil, but I'm sure it was certain groups of people, and it's
They were definitely motivated and inspired by the devil and his message, because there's no doubt about it, because it's destroyed. If you look at every problem we have in this country today, you can trace it right back. The origin is right there, what you just explained.
Right.
And it's a shame, and it's very discouraging. But I love these long form podcasts, because one of the things I really enjoy doing is getting to know people. And like I told you when I reached out to you about doing this podcast, is that I don't do interviews because, well, first of all, we're both cops, and
and then it gets to
I don't do. We have conversations, and
Right.
It's either interesting or it's not. I think you're a fascinating guy, and we haven't even begun to talk about your books, your background, your profession. And to be honest with you, I don't even know where to start. I have so many questions about so many different aspects about the different things that you've done. So let me do this. Let me get it back on track, because I can talk about this stuff for hours.
Agreed.
And we can solve all the problems of the world and all this. But with that being said, also, I think it's extremely important. And I think that the more that people know about you and who you are, your values, I think there's a lot of people that may not have thought about buying your book because maybe they just didn't even know who you were. Hopefully this is going to put a face on the author. This is going to give people, the public out there, background about you. It's going to be intriguing. I think they're going to find the same thing in you that I have found in you, that extremely interesting. I love your values. I love to support traditional people who love this country, who serve this country, that have now put down their thoughts on paper and have, and by the way, you're an amazing author. You're an incredible writer. I know Lisa, our director of publishing, she just, especially your last book, and everybody mispronounces it, including me. And it's really intriguing because it's named after a cat.
Well, named after a cat, after a city in Turkey.
Turkey, yes, exactly. And now I know that people are watching this are going, wait, what? Okay,
what are they talking about? Right.
But so why don't let's do this? Let's kind of start here, and then we'll move backwards. Now we followed you going into the Army, in the infantry. You're in West Germany. How does this tie into you writing a book about a cat named after a city in Turkey?
Well, and that's where, you talk about the way you're and you're very kind and said very kind words. I think that's probably your law enforcement background, because I've come to find everybody's interesting and everybody has a story to tell. And if you take the time to listen to it, you're like, oh, that's a good story, or I really enjoyed that. And for me, so I got in the Army and I quickly realized I didn't like the Army. You can only lay in the woods and get rained on and snowed on for so long a period of time. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure this is what I wanted. I was terrible.
Was it like the recruiting poster?
Yeah, no, it wasn't me. And I was thinking, if I would have ended up in the States at first, it probably would have been easier for me, because you're now you're different time zones, it's different languages. And again, growing up just outside of Philadelphia, nobody ever went anywhere but Philadelphia and the Jersey Shore. That was like Harrisburg was a major trip, So certainly going to Berlin was, an astronomical type of, I might as well have been on Mars. So as I was there and I kind of realized that, I'm not sure I want the military. This isn't what I thought it was going to be. And I remember being awakened one night at like 2 a.m. when I was in my bunk, and I swore I was being called by God to be a pastor. And I'm like, well, maybe that's what I'm supposed to do. I just couldn't go back to sleep. And and eventually it led me to go and talk with my pastor when I got back home. And I decided not to, but I think what I tapped into is I still wanted to have a life of service. So as I'm in the service, one of the things I realized, I didn't necessarily like the Army, but I didn't necessarily want to give up that service component. But shortly after all of that happened, a little thing called the First Gulf War took place. And all of the stuff that we were training for, for the last year prior to the Gulf War breaking out, all of a sudden became, hey, this is real. And at that point, now we know that that war lasted about 25 minutes. But then you don't all this training going to have to come to light now? Am I going to have to do the real thing? And the war ended quickly, but just after the war, they sent certain components to Turkey because the Kurdish refugees were fleeing northern Iraq and they were fleeing into Turkey. So it was an operation they called Operation Provide Comfort, where they were helping to escort those the Kurdish refugees into Turkey. So my unit got sent there on Operation Provide Comfort 2, and the town we ended up in was this little tiny clod of dirt called Salopi, Turkey. So here I am, and what's amazing is that was the best time I had in the service. We ended up staying there for 90 days. There was days it was 125 degrees in the heat. It was, the showers are always backed up. So you're standing in somebody else's shower water, and miserable was the field. It was dirty. It was hot, but it was nothing but camaraderie at that point. And I loved that portion of the Army. But one day I was sitting in this chow tent out in the desert, and I threw my cap on the ground, and we're sitting there eating at the picnic tables, and I hear this little chirping. I keep looking around like, guys, do you hear that? And they're all looking at me like, I don't know what you're talking about. Well, finally I look down and I see this little blob of black and white fur in my hat. And I looked at it, I'm like, what is that? And I finally pull up, well, there's this little tiny kitten curled up into my hat. And I said, guys, there's a cat in my hat. Now, Dr. Seuss may have made it famous, but I lived it. Okay. So we found this cat, and they're like, hey, let's make it a pet. So we ended up taking it back to our tent, and it was great. Gave her a bath, and I kind of did, explain.
You don't know where she came from.
I have no idea where she came from. But we took her back to the tent. We got her cleaned up in a water cooler. I didn't realize cats don't like water. I realized that. But we got her all cleaned up. And that night I put a little box next to my bed and a little towel at the bottom of the box, sat her in the box. She went to sleep like a baby. And I went to bed thinking, man, I'm the world's greatest parent. Well, a few hours later, all of a sudden she starts screaming bloody murder. And my lieutenant, who was the bunk right across from me, said, Beyer, if you don't get rid of that cat, I'm going to step on its head. So I'm like, all right, that was the end of that. So I tipped the box over. She ran out of the tent. And I thought, well, that lasted for a handful of hours. And the next morning I wake up and I feel somebody tickling the top of my head. So I reach up to knock somebody's hand away, thinking one of the guys are messing with me.
Yeah.
I reach up and feel a mound full of fur. Well, this kitten somewhere in the night came back, took up residence on my pillow, and decided to wake me up by licking the top of my head. So twice in 2 days, this little creature found me. And I realized then that, hey, she's kind of my cat at this point. And we kept her in the tent. She became I'd sneak her chow hall food and bring it to her. And then it got to the point we had to go back to Berlin. And then that's where I kind of write out in the story that, well, at one point the military police were coming around and rounding up all the stray animals to kill them
Oh,
because they were
yeah,
afraid
yeah,
of rabies.
right.
So I had to hide her from them MPs. And then I had to get her out of Turkey. Somebody said, "What are you going to do with this cat? You can't leave her behind." And I said, "Yeah, I've been feeding her for these 3 months now. I can't leave her." And then it came up to, how are we going to get her out of Turkey? How am I going to sneak her through Turkey? And all I can think about is the movie Midnight Express.
Midnight Express.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that guy got locked up in a Turkish prison for
Oh
smuggling
man.
drugs. And so that became this whole thing of how I found her, how she kind of became this cute little, because in a world of dusty, dirty, smelly men, she became this cute little feminine portion where, that you came back and she was excited to see you at night and slept in your bunk with
Something
you. She was
soft.
just sweet. And
Yeah.
so she kind of became our camp mascot. She definitely kind of became my feline daughter. And that began this journey of finding her, sneaking her out of Turkey, keeping her hidden in Berlin, convincing my obsessive compulsive mother to let me bring her home to the Philadelphia area. And so the book kind of documents all of that. And eventually I told that story to many people. But there was my first exposure to law enforcement was I did an internship with the FBI. And I met a young lady there. And obviously she fell in love immediately, she'll tell you a different story, but I mentioned that story to her, and she ended up becoming my wife. And she eventually said, that story is one of the things that made me first fall in love with you. And I think you need to just sit down, write the story. And so about 1.5 years ago, I sat down, finally put pen to paper, and every night I'd come out and read portions to my wife and my mother-in-law, and they would cry and they would laugh. And eventually I sent it to Lisa, and she proofread it, and I had no idea what it was. And she responded back with the greatest thing I ever heard. She's like, "I absolutely love this story." Yeah. And for somebody like Lisa, who sees so many manuscripts come through, that really touched me that she loved it so much. And that was off and running. So it's named Salopy because it was Salopy. When we first found the cat, somebody came up with the idea of, well, let's nickname her Shithead. So for 3 months, Army infantryman, she was Shithead. But then I'm like, I can't take this. I can't be calling this cat Shithead with my family. So
can you imagine the title of the book?
Salopy. Yeah, it would definitely make a title change for sure.
Yeah, exactly. That's very just military. It's just
yeah, for sure.
I mean, that's one of the better names that probably
that's right.
Good Lord, man. That is I guess there's so many different things that makes the book great, is because it's such a dichotomy. You did a great job of describing. You're out there, it's all a bunch of guys, a bunch of grunts, it's army, you're in Turkey, it's miserable conditions. And then here's this cute little kitten, not a cat, a kitten.
I mean, it this big. I mean, it was tiny. Yeah.
And you have no idea where she came from.
No idea. And then she ran out of
there had to be a litter of.
Found me again. I have no idea. I never saw another cat while we were there. And
that's crazy.
And I think that was God's little way of telling me, because up to that point, I was so homesick and so sick of the Army and just wanted to go home. And I think it was God's way of telling you, hey, there's something else in life besides your own worries. And then all of a sudden, my focus shifted from worrying about my own problems to now I got this little creature that's depending on me. And that's kind of what the story talks about, that and the importance of resilience of, hey, you don't always get what you want, but kind of like you were talking about earlier with kids, when you take away that struggle from them, you deprive them of a huge portion. And I think in our society, we have lost the value of resilience, the ability to, hey, this sucks, but just keep pushing on. This is not what you want. Yeah, you wanted this, but you got this. Just keep pushing on. And by the end of the book, I kind of wrote about how when you look back on your life's journey, you see the divinity associated with it, that I believe God has a plan for all of us. And it's not until you look back on the whole of your life that you see, oh, that's why I didn't get this. This is why this prayer didn't come true. This is why this was so terrible. And this is why this girlfriend broke up with me. And eventually when you look back on, you're like, oh, it all makes sense now. And that's what I try telling my boys, because I always pray at night. I can only rejoice in whatever happens to me because I only know you want the best. I just pray that you give me enough strength to overcome that doubt. And I realized all of that time, I was actually always been praying for resilience. Like, just give me enough to get through it. And I think a lot of, especially some of this younger generation, needs to realize the value of, yeah, it's okay that things stink. And you can do it. You can get through this, but you can't give up. And that's ultimately, I think, what my story and that story of Salope came down to, is that things don't always go the way you want them, but you got to keep pushing through.
You know, we just finished a movie here. One of my best buddies, Terry Weaver, I call him Doc. He was a corpsman over in the Sandbox and Patched Up Marines and all that and everything. And we connected some years ago. I heard him speak at some leadership conference. And anyway, fascinating guy. And long and short of it is, he got inspired. He wrote a screenplay to this movie. He'd never done any of this before. Hadn't acted, hadn't done anything. And he's just one of these very driven, very focused, very mission-oriented, dude, got a full-blown movie, like a real movie. It just came out.
What's it called?
The Beast of Trinity, Texas.
Okay.
It's... Yeah, well, it's
better. Yeah, I'll
send you the stuff. And anyway, we had the world premiere last month, and now we've had a couple of others, and they've been sold out. And it's crazy. And he used a lot of veterans. In fact, Travis, Dave's son, he plays a part in the film. Terry was looking for this particular part and a character, and I said, you need to talk to Travis. I think he could. Travis knocked it out of the park.
Oh,
crazy.
Funny.
I say all that to say this. I think this book would make I think it'd be a good movie.
It's funny you mention that, because about a week after it was released, I ended up on the phone with somebody who was a movie producer. And she said kind of the same thing, like, hey, let's make a movie of this. And so I started actually working on the screenplay, but life just between kids and business and parents, so my thought is, once the fall comes along, is to get back in this, because we actually haven't been to a movie as a family in months and months and months. But last night, my wife and my oldest son and I went to go see The Senior with Michael Chiklis. It's a Angel Studios new release, and God love them, they do wonderful work. But about the guy, the grandpa who goes back to college to play high school football because he has one more year of eligibility. So it was a true story. We went to see that last night. My wife looked at me afterwards and she goes, we just don't make those movies anymore. It was good. It was wholesome. There's no swearing. It was a good story. And so she leaned to me in the movie and she's like, you need to think about getting back to your Salope screenplay, because I think it's a good story. It's a good story. It's a sad story. It's a motivational story. And I think we're kind of out of ideas. So yeah, I would love for that to happen at some point. But
I'm going to
Trinity, Texas, I will be looking up for sure.
I'm going to connect you and Terry.
Okay. That'd be wonderful.
Because he literally, he had no background in any of this. None. Nothing. And he commented, he says, hey man, I'm going to write a movie. I'm going to do a movie. And I'm like, and I didn't laugh at him because he's that guy, the guy I'm talking about.
He just,
okay.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to do it. And I'm like, great. That's awesome. Can I help, and I ended up being involved in it and all that, which I absolutely loved. And I truly appreciate
accomplishment.
Having to be a part of that. But he is an amazing man. He's one of these guys also that he's got an incredible work ethic. He's always, in fact, he's working on his next movie now. But he's also one of these guys that he likes to be connected to people that are doing something. Does that make sense?
Right.
And he's written several books. I'm going to connect you two and I'm going to tell him, first thing he'll do, he'll read your book. That's the first thing he'll do. And
we'll always take that.
Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. No,
that's good enough. We'll take that.
Yeah, he'll read your book because he's going to find it interesting. And I'm going to tell him and say, Doc, I got a movie project for you. But he's also one of these guys, he likes to help people. And I think you two connecting would be because
that'd be wonderful. Yeah, I appreciate it.
I'm telling you, Brad, I think there's this book would make a good movie.
I've had a lot of people say that, and I think it just has that.
It's
kind of my dog skip kind of. It has
I mean.
And I think the producer I was speaking with at first, she was kind of like, "Oh, I can see, like you're carrying it through the battlefield." Like, look, I wasn't in combat. This is not that type of story. I think we're all kind of tired of the combat. You know, we've had that. We've had this is probably closer to Marley and Me and my dog Skip.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking. And
which actually I had a friend read it and he's like, all I could think of, it just felt like a Christmas story to me, like the movie A Christmas Story.
This is a
which everybody loves. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm telling you, Brad, this is a Hallmark movie. Which
from your lips to God's ears.
No, those movies do very well.
Yeah. My dream is my wife keeps laughing at me. Growing up in Norristown, there are some famous people that came out of Norristown, like Peter Boyle was one of who played like young Frankenstein and the dad from Everybody Loves Raymond, and like Tommy Lasorda is from there, and but Maria Bello, the actress, is from Norristown. And I said, my goal is to have Maria Bello play my mother in this movie. I said, a woman from Norristown playing a woman in Norristown. That would be the pinnacle. So I've actually been trying, because her parents still live in Norristown. So I'm kind of like, I got to find her parents, because if I could get her mom or dad to read the book, I know they'll pass it on to their daughter and we'll be off and running. So
that is so cool. Well,
but you never know. Like I said, it's everything I believe is God's plan. And you come back and you see, hey, that's why this person was put in my life, or I was put in their life. And so,
yeah. You never know. I mean, I'm just telling you. Yeah, and one person leads to another. I mean, the next thing you know, you're doing something that you never saw coming, and then all of a sudden, and
for sure,
a lot of times it's connecting the right people is the only thing that's missing.
Right.
You know,
really, there are a lot of good people out there who are trying to help other people, and that's what kind of renews your faith.
Lots of good people out there. Yes, sure. There's lots of. When we live in a world that just seems so messed up, and it is, we lose track that at the end of the day, though, if you combined all the good people on one side and all the bad people on the other side, there's still a lot more good people than there are bad people.
For sure.
The bad people are just bad, and the stuff they do gets a lot of attention.
Yeah. They tend to have a microphone.
Yeah. And good people tend to kind of be,
they put their head down and work.
They work and they go about their lives.
Raise their families.
But if they see somebody broken down the side of the road, they'll stop and help them change a tire. There's lots of those people out there.
I agree.
And but Doc is one of those folks. And man, you two would just hit it off.
I'd love to speak with him.
I'm gonna connect you guys. I really am, because I think it just dawned on me. I'm listening to you, how you walk through this and knowing more about you, and I'm going, dadgum, man, that book is a movie.
It's your lips to God's ears. I think it'd be fun and enjoyable and lighthearted, and something your grandmother could go to, and your child
and your kids, and it's a family movie. And so now what's funny is, and this just kind of speaks towards your ability to do all kinds of different things, and the diversity is just amazing. The first book you came to Defiance with was nothing like your second book. In fact, if your name wasn't on both of them, nobody would even guess in a million years that the same author wrote both these books, right?
For sure. Yeah, completely different projects.
I mean, just completely different projects. And I remember our first conversation when you came with your first book. I was intrigued because I had a background in law enforcement, and I'm kind of I'm just one of these people. I'm not anti-authoritarian. Look, I understand, and it's just in being a Christian, you have to submit to authority, and I get that, but I definitely have a rebel spirit about me as well, and I really don't mind submitting to good authority that has best. I guess my thing is I don't like tyranny. Right. If that makes sense. Sure. Does that make? And I don't like bullies. I do not.
That's like the law enforcement background in you, Mark, for sure.
Man, I don't like bullies. And so when, I'm not one of these guys that believes that everything that law enforcement does is good or right, or because there's bad apples out there. And sometimes people that they think are bad law enforcement are actually, no, they're pretty good. And then anyway, my point is that I'm not one of these that just says, hey, law enforcement, like any other government official, they need to be held accountable, and they make mistakes. They are people. They're not perfect. Even the good ones can make mistakes, but then there's some bad apples in there. And when we first talked about your first book, and you can give them a little bit of background on it, but it was very intriguing to me because it was about these confessions that were done where people would literally confess to crimes that they had not committed. And one of the things that's always bothered me, and I've seen things, and I'm very careful about, for instance, something that's happened today, and we've seen it, and I'm the biggest believer in the world that if somebody harms a child, listen, I'll pull the switch. I'll tie the noose.
You too. Yeah.
Oh man,
that's the ultimate bully.
Yeah, man. Listen, I am. But on the second half of that, though, I get concerned when people listen. There have been plenty of people that have been accused of stuff that never did it. I mean,
and I can tell you that's one of my biggest concerns anymore. And because I eventually went on to become a polygraph examiner, and that's one of my jobs, especially doing it now with my own company, is you'll get people in here who are accused of a specific crime, and they're like, I want to take a polygraph test to prove my innocence. And they come in, they take the test, and they pass the test. And a lot of times it's false rape accusations and things like that, or it's a contentious divorce and saying, my husband's touching my children sexually. They give them the test, and they pass the test. And so to me also, that's a form of bullying. I don't like that type of bullying approach. So that I get. And really the whole false confession thing for me, because I spent 27 years with the FBI. My last 18 years of that were as a polygraph examiner, as a special agent and a polygraph examiner. So we would interrogate people routinely, because just running the polygraph was only half of the job. The second part of the job was if they failed the test, we would interrogate the person and try to get them to admit that what they did, or to get them to admit the crime that they just failed the polygraph test on. So we became very good at interrogating people because we do it all the time. If you want somebody who's very good at drywall, you go to somebody who does drywall all the time. They don't do it every 10 years. So we are often called in to interrogate people because that's what we did for a living. And it was what got me interested in the whole false confession issue was I was maybe a polygraph examiner for about 4 years or so, maybe 6 or 7 years. And I was asked to give a polygraph examination of a guy whose 3-month-old daughter died while in his custody. And to
Mm.
save your viewers, it was obviously sexually related.
Oh,
And so the guy failed the examination. I interrogated him. And after a couple hours, he finally said, "You know what? I I'm not I think his term was I'm 50% certain that I may have done this. I can't say for sure. It's 50-50 chance I may have done it. I know though, if I did it, I was possessed at the time I did it." And I'm like, okay, well, we're starting to get a little closer. We went from no, I didn't do this to there's a 50-50 chance that I did. And all of a sudden he said, I'd like to speak with an attorney. And that ended the interrogation. Obviously, that's the end of it. He asked for an attorney. They drove him home, and that was the end of it. And for months, because the wheels of the federal government turned so slowly, for months, we didn't hear anything about it until one day a federal prosecutor called me and said, "Hey, do you remember this guy?" And I said, "Yeah, I remember." And they said, "Well, they're bringing him, he wants to take the matter to trial. And they're bringing in an academic, false confession expert witness who is claiming two things. One, that you engaged in techniques that are likely to cause a false confession. And two, that this individual was psychologically ripe for a false confession." So they were like, "Are you familiar with false confession literature?" I said, "No, not at all." And so they started sending me this guy's work. And I started reading through it. I'm like, boy, this doesn't sound anything like what I do for a living. Because there's an academic narrative out there that all law enforcement is bad, and that we use things like the Reed technique, and the Reed technique causes people to falsely confess. And I think they present this belief that it's the old movies with the bare naked swinging light bulb, and pounding the fist on the table, and good SOB, and that people falsely confess. And in dealing with 100 other polygraph examiners in the FBI, as you sit and talk to people, like, yeah, that's not what we do to get people to confess. And I started realizing, hey, what you're talking about doesn't reflect reality. So I started looking into it. And then by then I was involved in a PhD program, and I decided to do my dissertation on false confessions. More specifically, I talked to federal law enforcement polygraph examiners who interrogate for a living and asked them, what are your experiences with false confessions? If they took place, what were you doing when you got the false confession? And what do you think works? What do you think is a good interrogation technique? What do you think doesn't work? So I went through the whole dissertation. It ended up in a 330-page dissertation. And then about 18 months after that, after I graduated, I got into the Michigan State Police. I met their lieutenant in charge of their polygraph program. And I said, would you guys be interested in kind of replicating? Let me interview your people. And what I did is I did like hour-long interviews with these individuals and just asked them these questions. And despite being separated by about 18 months, the state examiners had the exact same information as the federal examiners. And what it ended up was I came up with, once you start looking at it, the academic approach, I believe, is completely wrong. Good examiners or good interrogators don't yell at people. They don't threaten people. They don't beat people. False confessions happen, but I don't believe they happen the extent to which they claim they happen. And this kind of just got my interest started. I wrote an academic article. Well, they had complaints because I'm pushing against their existing narrative. So at first they didn't want to publish the article. And then I pushed back, and eventually they published the article. But I said, you know what, the second time, instead of breaking it down into different interview or different journal articles, taking my dissertation and making it separate articles, I'm just going to sit down and write a book. So I wrote a book, and what I called it was Rethinking the False Confession Phenomenon, because I think the reason it exists, the reason academics are working so hard on this, is if you put yourself in the shoes of a defense attorney, and you come forward and you say, all right, hey, I got a new case today, and it looks like Mark Pruitt is arrested for a bank robbery. Oh, that's great. That's a sexy case. I haven't had one of those in a while. And all of a sudden, as a defense attorney, you start looking at it and you see, wow, Mark Pruitt has already falsely confessed, or I'm sorry, has already confessed to this issue. It kind of takes the wind out of the defense attorney's sails, right? There's nothing else I can do. My client has already confessed to the crime. So the only option they have available to them at that point is they have to walk into court and try to get that confession thrown out.
Right.
And what they look at is they look to these academic who all of their research takes place with college students for the most part. They do these abnormal research projects with college students, and they come to what I believe are flawed conclusions based on unrealistic laboratory experimentation designs. And they automatically say, well, that's what happens in the real world. So the book I ended up writing kind of poked holes in the existing academic narrative. So I went to some other publishers, tried to get it published. They sent it out for peer review. Well, the peer review, it goes right to the academics. People went apoplectic. Who is this guy? How dare he say this? The Reed technique is evil. Law enforcement punishes, beats up people until they falsely confess. False confessions happen routinely. And when I start looking at the research and pick apart the research, I believe you come away with a different point of view that kind of stands up for the good guys, the law enforcement officers whose reputations and interrogative techniques are constantly being maligned in court by these academics who have never interrogated an individual their whole lives. I think I made the point in the book. You have the people who can do and the people who can't sit in the sidelines and tell everybody else you're doing it wrong. So after being turned down by multiple publishers because the peer review, they weren't having it. The academics have one way of thinking, and it's what I call an intolerance of dissent. They don't want to hear anything that disagrees with them. And that's when I ended up calling you at Defiance Press. And I think we talked for about an hour about this situation. And, I spoke with Dave, and Dave was like, I created Defiance Press because of this type of issue. Right. That conservative voices and differing approaches to academics or academia or things like that are just not being given a home. And that started my journey with Defiance Press, was that book. And when I remember going out to my wife and saying, look at the logo for this company. And it's the one you have on your hat. And she's like, that's right. That's where you need to be. Because what I did, what this book really is, if you think about it, is it's an act of defiance. I'm defying what everybody else is saying. And it's what I presented maybe about 20 minutes of this issue at a professional conference about 18 months ago. And there was an academic in the audience. And I kind of joked with my wife when I came home. She was kind of a cross between a hemorrhoid commercial and watching the guy in Poltergeist who pulled his face off, because she sat there the whole time and I can't believe he's saying this. And she acted so inappropriately that people were coming up to me after the conference saying, listen, I apologize on her behalf. She was completely inappropriate. I finally said to her, let's talk offline, because she was taking up so much time with her questions. Well, every time I saw her at the conference, she would run the opposite direction. She didn't want to talk about the issue because I'd rather shut down your ability to talk than have an actual open and honest discussion about it. So I found out months later that she had actually said, I'm going to his publisher, i.e. Defiance Press, and telling them to remove his book from circulation. Like, it really kind of talk about the intolerance of dissent. Instead of making an argument, I'm going to shut down your voice. So I immediately called Defiance and said, hey, I don't know if this is ever going to come to fruition, but just to let you know, this is what this academic is saying. She's going to try to have you guys pull my book from circulation. And I spoke with Dave, and he said, I hope she calls while I'm working.
Yes.
And the Defiance folks immediately circled their wagons, and I've always appreciated that. I never heard if she ever did complain about it, but that kind of goes to
she did. We would have.
I don't know if she did or not, but
she didn't, because Dave would have been. I can only imagine. can only imagine what Dave would have done. No, and he was serious. He would have. I guarantee he was hoping she would. He was hoping she would.
And that's what, and immediately I was getting emails from people at Defiance Press saying, don't worry, we have your back. You have a right to disagree. And, but so yeah, that's what got me started. And then when it came to the second book, it's like, I'm looking to publish, I'm going home. I'm going back to Defiance. You had my back the first time. That's the family we're looking at. We support one another, and didn't even hesitate in bringing it back to you. So,
oh well, God bless you. We really appreciate you, and the whole book business is very interesting, isn't it? And I'm sure your journey through this has been very enlightening. It's not,
for sure.
It's not what you probably thought it was, and I try to explain that to aspiring authors that, hey, there's going to be a lot of work with this. It just doesn't matter how good your book is. There's 1,000 things that are involved here. It's a journey. You got to treat it like a business. Lisa's always said that you're very, very teachable. You're very compliant in a good way. You're not a pushover like that. I'm just saying you're hungry to learn how to do this. You really are interested in being a professional and being a good representative and willing to do the work. And I'm telling you, that's quite a compliment coming from Lisa, because she just doesn't say that about everybody. No, she has really enjoyed working with you. And so that's really, and you got to be like, and we're not for everybody. We're not. I tell people all the time, we're not a fit for everybody, right. But those who we are a fit for, we're probably the only fit, if that makes any sense.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Because we're very outspoken. We're very, we're just not everybody's cup of tea.
Right.
But for those who do have the same, view on life and same values and stuff like that, I think that we really do try to do everything we can to help our authors.
You guys you don't need me. I've told you that before. You guys have been great, and that's why when I wrote Salopia, I'm like, I'm going back home. So
well, I think we're just getting started too. I think there's some great things. The one thing I was going to ask you about your first book and about your experience and the things that you observed, do false confessions ever happen?
Oh, for sure.
So it's something that does happen. I mean, it's very rare.
They will tell you it's not. I mean, what academia will tell you two things. One, we don't know how often false confessions occur. But two, we know they happen routinely.
No,
to me, it's kind of like if I pulled up a deck of cards and said, all right, Mark, I just pulled out a card here. Do you know what the card is? And you said, I have no idea what that card is, but I know it's not a club. Well, if you don't know, you don't know. So as I've gone out and I've taught this subject to other law enforcement officers and polygraph examiners and interrogators, I've told them the one thing that works from the law enforcement perspective is the fact that they simply don't know how many false confessions occur. So to say we don't know how often they happen, we just know they happen a lot, is an inaccurate statement. Because if you don't know, they could happen far less than you think it actually takes place. And when you do tend to see it, it tends to be with very young children. It tends to be with people who are cognitively impaired. It tends to happen with people who, I don't know, maybe drunk or high at the time of the interrogation and they're not thinking clearly. It's people who are mentally ill, or it's people who just absolutely have the hell beat out of them by law enforcement, which has tended to happen back at the time of the third degree, right? And when you start looking at the Innocence Project, which is a great organization from the standpoint they're the last line of defense to make sure somebody isn't wrongfully convicted for a crime they didn't actually commit. But even when you look at their own data, some of these cases go back 30, 40, 50 years. And in presenting this to groups, I often joke, I was born in 71. So, which meant my mother was pregnant with me in 1970. and she had a bunch of miscarriages before me. She was very nervous about her pregnancy with me. She went to her doctor, and her doctor told her, Julie, I want you to go home, put your feet up, pour yourself a cup of coffee, smoke a cigarette, and try to relax, right? Can you imagine a doctor today telling his pregnant patient to go home and smoke a cigarette? And I've often joked, I said, if you ever find that doctor, let me know, because I could be 6'4" if my mother wasn't sucking down Parliament 100s during my pregnancy, But the key, though, is, would we judge a doctor today based on the things a doctor did 50 years ago? Obviously, the medical profession has advanced since that point. The same thing with law enforcement. We don't do the same thing in law enforcement today that they did 50 years ago. So I think it's wrong to judge law enforcement today based on some of those things that happened decades earlier. So where I have a profound disagreement with academia is it's not necessarily the interrogative technique, because the interrogative technique is really just it's just a recipe. And if you're getting false confessions, then you're probably not following the recipe correctly. If you're burning the cookies, you're not following the recipe. And ultimately, I can tell you my experience and the people that I've talked with who specialize in interrogation, people don't talk to people they don't like. It's that simple. If you and I were neighbors and you didn't like me and I didn't like you, we're probably not going to talk there. And people are not going to tell their deepest, darkest secrets to somebody they don't trust. So I think law enforcement officers who are good at getting confessions, and I don't say that to be braggadocious, but I've been very good at getting confessions over my career, because what you need to do is you need to create an environment where the person feels comfortable. They don't feel judged for the action they engaged in, the worst thing they ever done in their life. If you come in and talk to somebody who's suspected of engaging in sexual activity with a child, nobody's going to respond to, hey, you sick freak, tell me. It doesn't work that way. What you need to do is to make people, it's okay to hate the sin, but love the sinner. And when you talk to these people and you let them know, hey, I don't think this defines who you are, it's just a stupid mistake you made, people become much more comfortable admitting, yes, it was a stupid mistake. Did it happen any other time? No, it was only that one time. That's a hell of a lot different than beating somebody with a nightstick or holding a gun to their head and said, if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'm going to shoot you and make it look like a suicide. I don't think those things happen anymore, because I think law enforcement has become.
I don't think they do either.
But this has become a cash cow for many academics, where they're constantly being called in for tens of thousands of dollars a pop to walk into court and saying, yes, according to the research, this is likely to have caused a false confession. Well, it's likely to have caused a false confession with a college student who's being interrogated by another college student about a non-criminal act for an interrogation that took place for over 4 minutes. Well, that's great in a university setting. That's not what happens in the real world. So, yeah, false confessions happen. I don't think they happen to the degree at which they claim they do. And really, I think it's really just become a cottage industry that's making a lot of people rich to be immediately called upon, because the majority of the times they're serving the defense attorney, right? Sure. It's the defense attorney calling these expert witnesses saying, hey, I've got a guy who's already confessed. Can you help me make this erase some doubt in the minds of the triers of fact, the judge, the jury, about this confession? Can you help me with that? Sure. What do you charge? We'll call it 15 grand and call it even. So that's where
that's a great point. And I think those same academics are the ones that were probably the professors that a lot of these George Soros judges and district attorneys and prosecutors that are releasing all these criminals on the street, they probably learned.
Well, and it's funny, because I'll often when I go out and present, on this topic, which is generally law enforcement audiences, I'll say, by a show of hands, how many people here got into law enforcement to put the wrong person behind bars?
Oh my gosh. Right.
Well, obviously nobody gets into But I've often said, if you asked a room full of academics who are studying this false confession issue and said, hey, by a show of hands, how many people here think the truly guilty should be prosecuted for their crimes? You wouldn't see every single hand raised.
No, you wouldn't.
And to me, justice is, there's two sides to that coin. One is you got to make sure the innocent are not caught up in the dragnet. And the other side is you have to make sure that the truly guilty are truly punished for their crimes. There's people out there who only believe in that first half. They don't believe in the second. And that's why you see crimes in a lot of these major cities, because we've lost the appetite to punish the truly guilty. And
yeah, well, and on the other side of that coin, we've seen overzealous prosecutors that have, well, look what they did to Trump, for instance. And it really kind of, it's a multi-tiered justice system based on maybe your political affiliation, your skin color, it could be all.
And I can tell you that's the biggest thing, Mark. And I know working with the Bureau, the majority of my career, the best thing about the FBI is we were always apolitical. It didn't matter, hey, if you were a Republican governor and you're on the take, we'd come after you. If you're a Democrat governor, we'll come after you. The majority of my career, it never mattered to me. Like, bad was bad, wrong was wrong. It didn't matter which side of the political aisle you came from. That started to change as time went by, and that's arguments people could get involved in. But I think once you start allowing your political background to influence your decision making, especially your investigative interests, that's where the problem is. So just do the right thing. And if it's against your particular political affiliation, so be it. But you're not there as a politician. Just do your job. And that's the concern I always had, where it seemed like politics, and not just the FBI, in a lot of places, because if you think about it, you get sheriffs who are elected officials.
Yeah, that's right.
You get, judges and prosecutors are elected officials. Yep. Once it starts becoming political, to me, law enforcement is no place for politics.
We're now reaping the whirlwind of the seeds that we have sown. And a lot of people say, oh, it started with Barack Obama. I said, no, it started way before then. This is something that it's been very, very gradual over many, 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 many decades. And it's kind of like, who was it that made that saying famous, where they asked him about, I forget who it was, well-known billionaire or something. They said, well, how did you go bankrupt? And he said, well, very slowly at first, and then all of a sudden. And that's kind of what we've seen here, because right. Your span in the FBI was over enough years that the FBI that you first started with, I guarantee you, doesn't look very much like the FBI under James Comey. Am I being too assumptive here? And I don't want to get you in trouble. I don't know. I don't want you to
Correct.
get into
Yeah, there were definitely changes. And I think where the changes come from, and it's really this is more of a reflection of society. Sadly, we've gotten to a point in society where, if you think about it, going back there, you had Republicans, you had Democrats. Growing up, most people didn't know who was who.
Exactly. Yeah.
You didn't talk about how much money you made. You didn't talk about religion, and you didn't talk about politics. And eventually, we now sadly live in a society where you're either for us or you're against us. And to me, that is a critical bifurcation of our society, because once you do that, now we're no longer united as Americans. Now we're divided by political interests. And it's not, if that's happening on the national level, it's not surprising that it could seep down into law enforcement as well. And
I think it's happened.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we've seen it.
For sure.
Unfortunately, I mean,
For sure.
but there's lots of um, there's lots of examples, unfortunately, today of these types of things happening. And I remember, um, I just, I just, I'm not necessarily proud of it. I'm just saying it is what it is. But when I was a Houston cop, it was the mid '80s, and there was an economic downturn in Houston. I think oil went to something like $5 a barrel or something like that. It was crazy. And Houston back then was primarily, the economy was all around the energy, oil and gas. And it affected everything. Well, it affected the economy of Houston, and it affected the city budget and things like this. And so they had this bright idea that they were going to recommend that all us cops were going to have to write 5 tickets a day, because tickets are a revenue generator, which I totally disagree with, but it is what it is. Well, everybody went along with it except for me. And I caused my supervisors more hell because I was this weird guy. This is just who it's who I am. It's in my blood. I would sit in the back of the roll call room, and I'd be leaning back on my chair, 2 legs, and I'd be leaning back, and they would, always make, okay, remember everybody, you got to write, you got to get your 5, we call them ducks. I don't know where that comes from, but you got to get your 5 ducks, and I would always go and I'd reach in my pocket for my pocket constitution to pull it out. And it got to the point where the evening shift or the night shift supervisor would just start screaming at me, I know, Pruitt, just, and I just say, hey, just show me where we need to shave off, parts of this, and I'll be happy to comply with that. But you can't make me arrest people. And that's what that's what a ticket is.
Right.
It's in lieu of taking you to jail. We're releasing you on your own, personal recognizance, basically just sending money, and we don't have to take you to jail. But there was something about that so because we're having an economic downturn, you want me to go out and arrest 5 people a night for the revenue of those.
That'd be a tough pill to swallow.
This what?
I said that would be a tough pill to swallow.
Yeah, but what the other thing about that was that really shocked me. It really shocked me. I was the only cop in the city that refused to write the tickets. Now, of course, not all cops are street cops. Okay, first of all, because you got different cops doing different. But out of all, because I actually the president of the policemen's union actually came and visited me, and he said, "Dude, are you sure? They're going to try to put the screws to you." And I said, "Let them." He told me, he said, "You're the only cop you're the only street cop that's
and
not."
Why is that? Because
what's that?
I said the reason for that is law enforcement is inherently rule followers. They enroll in a profession that enforces the rules. So that tends to be done by people who believe in rules and enforce the rules. So the problem becomes,
I would hope so.
What if all of a sudden they say to you, okay, we don't need you to write 5 tickets tonight. We need you to write 5 tickets tonight against Republicans, or 5 tickets tonight against Democrats. And therein becomes the problem. And I think it's a slippery slope.
It really alarmed me.
Politics at the door,
It really alarmed me that, and I would talk to other cops, and they just would laugh at me. They'd think I was just, damn, Pruitt, you just don't want to write tickets. And I go, no, that's not it. That's not it. You can't do that. Well, it ain't that big a deal. And I said, okay, well, what if all of a sudden they come in and they say, you know what? We don't like Italians anymore. We need you to, or just come up with any scenario. I don't care what it is, but it's just because we need to generate new money or whatever the reason. It doesn't matter. If they tell us to do something, are you just going to do it because they tell you got to do it? man, I got a
Well,
problem with that.
the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right?
Exactly. And man, and when we look and see what's going on in the UK today, these Bobbies going around and arresting people for memes.
Each. Right. Yeah.
I'm like, you got to be, and I got to be honest with you, Brad. I'm shocked. I'm not shocked that the government of the UK would pass these laws and say, I'm stunned that law enforcement officers in not Dubai, not Saudi Arabia,
Right.
Great Britain.
Yes. Yeah.
Hey, that person made somebody feel uncomfortable with a meme that they reshare.
And that kind of circles back to, I think we as parents we're trying to take away the pain of our children. And then I think it went to our government. Our government's trying to take away the pain of our citizens. And that pain is nobody should ever have to feel uncomfortable. Well, there is no constitutional right to not feel uncomfortable, right?
No.
That's not a right you're guaranteed to. And again, I'd like to believe on some level these people are well-meaning folks when they come up with these ideas. But again,
You're
there's
way kinder than I am, Brad.
What's that?
You're way nicer than I am. That's what you did. You have a very good heart, and God bless you. I don't mean that in any. I mean seriously.
No, I get what you're saying, and I would like to think, hey, we're doing it for the good, but it's you can't legislate discomfort, right? You can't. Hey, we're gonna prosecute, and some of the things you hear that making a meme, or you've got the comedian in England being arrested. That's frightening, and the concern is what happens across the pond tends to travel back here, which I think one of my real interesting experiences is a number of years back. I had to go to a 2-week school to become a hostage negotiator, a crisis negotiator. We had foreign students in our class, people who are already negotiators from Belgium, England, Australia, some Germany. And because I had lived in DC for a number of years, they said, hey, Brad, it's the weekend. If we gave you a van, since you know the area, can you take these foreign students up and show them around the monuments? So I said, sure. That was one of the most interesting experiences I ever had, because it's so interesting to see your own country, in particular, see DC through the eyes of a foreigner. And we're driving around. I remember one of them saying, my goodness, you have a lot of memorials about war here. And then they said, but I guess that makes sense. You guys had to fight just to exist. And I said, yeah, that's true. And which makes you hearken back to like the Boston Tea Party. The thing about Americans, we kind of have a very finely hinged bullshit flag, which I think when we talked about these younger generations, these young kids, the kids my kids' age, they have that because they've been given. They have ready access to information like no generation
Google everything
before, and they can immediately point out, that's not true. I don't agree with that. You're lying to me, which previous generations didn't have that. We're always kind of used to, if the government told me, it must be true. Or if Walter Cronkite told me, it must be true. I would think that I would like to think that if that started migrating to the United States, where people are now being arrested because of memes, I would like to think that we would have another Boston Tea Party type movement where, hey, that's the hill I'm willing to die on right there. But unfortunately, we are at that point in our society. And I kind of worry about that after Charlie Kirk's death here, because now you see a lot of crackdown on speech. And I get it. but it's that balance between we still have the right to free speech. And okay, if I don't agree with your speech today, once my group's out of power and your group's in power, the pendulum's gonna swing back and hit me. And I think that's where we just need to get back to the Constitution, right? That's what we're founded on. It's not movable, it's not flexible. You had brilliant men devise this hundreds of years ago. It's a template for our society. And I think part of it is we've gotten away from that, which causes part of the problems. Again, if you're burning the cookies, you're no longer following the recipe.
Yeah, George Orwell might say something like, well, some speech is freer than other speech.
Right. And some people are more equal than others. Yeah.
And some people are more. And man, the second you start going down that path, it doesn't go anywhere good. And, and again, I think that it goes back to also, it's part of the feminization of our society. Women by their nature are more egalitarian. You think about it when they're working with small children and stuff. They've got to make sure everybody gets one cookie each, and it's important for that's the way God created them. That's how they're wired, and it is wonderful, and it sounds great. And if we want to be Pollyannish and think, "Oh, I wish the world worked like that," it's great to think like that. But
right.
At the end of the day, the world doesn't work like that, and that's where men come in.
Right.
It's like that all sounds great, but at the end of the day, free speech was written for the speech that all of us probably don't like.
Right.
The egalitarian
it's easy to
thing.
Agree. Yeah, I agree. As long as you're saying what I agree with, I'm good with it.
Yeah. But that's not free speech. Free speech is this person over here saying something vile.
Right.
They have every right to say that, and I will fight to the death to protect them to say that, because if that person can't say that, then when are they coming after my speech?
Yes, for sure.
And here's something else, because people talk about this on social media, they say, well, you can't say all this stuff on social. And I go, first of all, I believe you should be able to say whatever you want on social media, because number one, you know what? I want to know who these animals are.
Right, for sure.
I want to know who the crazy, violent, wicked, I want to know who they are. And they will let you know who they are.
For sure.
I say, let everybody say what they want. Because the other thing is too, and this is a weird thing, but whatever. But, we were never designed to be a police state. You hear about people, well, we want cops on every corner. No, that's not what the founder said. This form of government, this republic, this constitutional republic that we've created for you, it can only operate if the people that are that are in this culture are good, moral, religious people. It is completely will not work for any other culture. It won't work. If the people are not based and rooted in Christianity, biblical principles, this doesn't work, because this is not a police state. We can't put cops on every corner. There was a time, I love Wyoming. Have you ever been out west? Have you ever spent any time out west? I love the people of Wyoming. And by the way, I love the TV series Yellowstone.
Right.
Just absolute. I will watch that. I think I've watched the series, I don't know how many times. I've lost count. I love it. I love it. I love Wyoming. Because the people out there, most of the population lives in areas there's no 911. Neighbors, they look out for one another and they leave each other alone, and they take care of their own issues. If you start doing something stupid out near Tin Sleep, Wyoming,
they're going to take care of it on their own. Right. It's funny too, because as you talk about it and as you mentioned that, we find my wife and I have already had discussions and just had it today recently. But as we were going on a walk today, as I get older and you start talking about, hey, what are we going to do? What's retirement going to look like? Ultimately, when it's all said and done, I just want to be left alone.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of people from the conservative standpoint, like, look, I just want to be left alone.
Leave me alone.
That's what it comes down to. And but those, you can see where those two sides, if you've got one side saying, no, I want to dictate how you act, and the other half is going, I just want to be left alone. I think historically, this group has kind of been pushing this group until now they finally got their back against the wall and they're starting to push back a little bit, which this side now doesn't like that. And now we find our place. Actually, just before I got on this podcast with you, here in Michigan, where my son played baseball yesterday, just had a church shooting today.
I saw that. Yes, I saw
at a Mormon church. I don't know any information about it, but this is what happens when we have that intolerance of dissent. And really, I think too, it kind of links back to that feminization of boys, because let's be honest, the majority of these are males. And historically, men are much more aggressive. We're much more combative. We're much more competitive. And where did that come out? It came out in baseball and basketball and football and soccer and wrestling and lacrosse. That's where it came out. And all of a sudden, we've kind of gotten rid of sporting events, or we've kind of messed with sporting events a little bit, or we're now everybody gets a participation trophy, those types of things. Or you've got people lobbying sports aren't good anyway because they cause unhealthy competition. All of this kind of wussification of the male species, that I think that violence, that competitiveness still has to come out somewhere. And I think you're getting these young men who it's just become so bottled up that, like the Charlie Kirk assassin, all of a sudden now you say something that I don't believe in, that violence has to come out somewhere because it hasn't been tapped, it hasn't been regulated up until this point. In fact, it's kind of been pushed down like a volcano your whole life, that it's wrong to feel that way. It's wrong to feel aggressive or competitive or want to wrestle or any of those things. It's got to come out some point. And I think what we're seeing is the outcome of that deliberate effort to remove that masculinity from males. It's still there. It's just coming out, sadly, at the end of a gun.
Yeah, Dr. Jordan Peterson does some amazing talks and lectures on this whole subject matter. And you're absolutely correct. It's the feminization of boys, because, again, males and females handle things totally different. Females, for the most part, they get in a fight, they're going to pull some hair, they're going to bite, but it's not going to be a fatality unless there's a weapon involved. Men, much stronger and much more harm can be done. I think one of the things that's unfortunate, I think why we have so many issues like this, where you have these feminized boys that never grow up, they're post-pubescent boys, they're never men. Men don't do these things. Men don't do that. Males do.
Right.
Effeminate males, post-pubescent boys, males that never grow up, never mature, never become masculine, because men are stoic by nature. Well, not by nature, but they're stoic because they've been raised by men. They understand, they're protectors, they're sheepdogs. But boys that have never been raised by a man, that don't have a masculine figure in their life, they react, they lash out. Unfortunately, when they do it, they're not doing it by backbiting or what Jordan Peterson calls personal assassination, or not assassinate, but going after somebody, just saying bad things about them on social media, this and that. Boys will pick up a gun.
Right.
And if they're not constrained by a strong masculine influence in their life to teach them. Now, that's what did Peterson say? He said, you should teach your boys to be monsters, but they need to be under control. And it's that control that keeps these things from happening. But the men are protectors by nature, and they can stand up against these. And that's the other problem. We don't have very many men. So people can just walk into a church or drive their truck through a front door, and the few places where you see the people that have stood up against it, they're men and they're armed, right, and they're protectors and they're sheepdogs, but we just don't have very many. And it's so unfortunate. Yeah, I was watching this on unfold, and we'll see who this person was that we had the shooting in North Carolina too last night. So I'm afraid that I don't want to say that we're at 1860, but I think we're peering into the abyss. I think we're peering into
everything regresses towards the mean.
Yeah.
And I don't know what's going to make us finally get back to that even keel. I hope it's not mass violence. But and another thing too that we didn't talk about is, if you think about it, in addition to, the feminization of boys, you also have societally this belief that everybody's great, right? Everybody gets a participation trophy. Everybody in school gets to retake the test until you get an A. So everybody's a Rhodes Scholar. Everybody's a wonder athlete, because even though they're no good, they're playing travel sports, and their whole life their parents are telling them to save them from that drastic realization that maybe you're not as good as you think you are. We've created these people who have this ideal sense of self. But when it's compared to eventually when you get into the real world, and hey, my mom always told me how wonderful I am, and all of a sudden now I have a boss telling me I have no idea what I'm doing. You've got this convergence, and as that real self meets the ideal self, I think that's another trigger. And because we have no external outlet for that masculinity, it's going to come out in a problematic fashion. And that's all of this stuff. As we've talked about, all of this stuff has repercussions. You can't just tinker with normal human interaction and expect it to then have no negative outcome.
There are laws of nature.
Correct.
And you can violate those laws, but then there's going to be a repercussion to that.
For sure.
And we have violated the nature of boys, and we've sat them in classrooms for hours and hours and hours upon, and when they can't behave, we medicate them. And we've done everything we can to destroy boys. And I think, and again, I give credit to the devil on this stuff, because the devil knew if he could get rid of men, then everything else crumbles. And our whole society now is about telling 6-year-old boys to sit still for 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours a day. It destroys them. I
can tell you, my boys hate school. Their male friends hate school.
Hate it.
And it was funny. I remember I often have told this story to people. We were at the beach one time, and my sister-in-law was over, and she brought a little blanket or a towel and laid it down on the beach. And my wife said, what are you doing that for? She's like, well, to sit the girls on. She had, at that point, I think it was like a 4-year-old and 2-year-old. And she put the 2 girls on there. And she's like, my wife said, oh my God, they just sit there? And they're like, yeah, that's why we put the towel down, so they won't get sand. Meanwhile, our 2 boys are like horsemen. They're all over the road. And the problem is, you can't take that natural inclination of boys and sit them on a towel for 6 or 7 hours a day, but again, it leads to over medication because there's something wrong with them. No, there's not. There's
nothing wrong with them.
Boys. And what I tell you, and we said about our own sons, and I coached Little League baseball and sports for a number of years. Boys are very simple. They're like border collies. You just need to work them. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
We'll go run, wear them out, and but again, which is why now you see more girls are going to college and graduating with degrees than boys are doing that, because they've grown up hating school. And it just transfers later into their lives. And again, you can't sit them on the towel. They're not going to sit still.
No, that was me. And that's why I hated school. I hated everything about school, but I love to learn.
Right.
See, I love to learn. I
Right.
love learning. I don't watch sports. I don't watch TV. I'm always listening to a podcast, reading a book, doing things. I love
And
to
doing,
learn.
it's funny. I remember I was about 17 years old and I was getting back to religion. I was teaching Sunday school at our church. And so I had like 4 and 5-year-olds. And
Oh my God.
yeah, at 17. Yeah. So I'm like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Because most of the class was boys. And I drew a big goalpost on the blackboard. And I got the erasers, the chalkboard erasers, got them real chalky. And I stuck them on the ground. I said, here's what we're going to do. We all have to remember something from this story. So I read the Bible story and I said, if you get the answer right, you get to try to kick the field goal. You get to try to kick this eraser through the uprights, and it's got a lot of dust on it, so we'll be able to see if it lands in or fair. Well, the boys just absolutely loved it. And I remember hearing from parents like, what were you doing? Were you kicking field goals? And like, yeah, he told me they remembered this about the Bible story. That's boys. There's a certain way that's not. Girls are much better at sitting still, focused attention, playing that.
Go.
Get them up. I can tell you, run them around. Quite frankly, you probably need recess for males in high school. Like, let them go, run around the track for a minute, come back, you'll get more out of them. But
No doubt.
It's going to take effort, and it has to take a realization that we're not all the same.
No, and you can't try to teach. Believe me, I could go on for hours about the evils of public education and our education system, and I am so thankful. I'm watching these parents now homeschooling their kids and realizing they're taking responsibility for kids. And this one area I would go to and I'd do my cardio during the day, and I'd go through the woods and all this stuff. And a lot of times I'd see homeschool moms bringing their kids out, and I could always tell the homeschool kids, first of all, none of them have the med eyes. You know what I'm talking about? MED. None of them are medicated.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
they don't have that blank, just dull. I mean, they look you in the eyes. They can carry on a conversation. They can. I mean, all these. It's just
Right.
The differences between these young people that are homeschooled versus kids that sit in the class. It's unbelievable, and I'm so thankful that more and more parents are starting to take responsibility for raising their kids now and not turning them over to the state. And I think that's another thing that's going to make a huge difference, and why I'm optimistic about the future, because I'm starting to see that. And I know my kids are doing that with their kids, and and I know it's not easy. I know, but
it takes effort, right? But every good outcome involves some kind of effort.
You got to raise your kids.
Right.
Why'd you have them?
Right.
Why'd you have them? I mean, just, so anyway, there's one thing I've got to ask you, and I know we're coming down. I could go on for,
it's been a good talk for sure.
I could go on for hours, but I know this is a long shot. But one of the guys that I'm intrigued with, FBI employee, and I don't know if you ever had a chance to meet him, or maybe if you even knew him. Did you ever meet Gary? I want to make sure I'm pronouncing his name correct. Nesner. Gary Nesner.
Yeah.
Did you ever meet him?
Yeah, he was big in the crisis negotiation field. So
yeah, he was he was the first negotiator at Waco.
Yeah. Yep.
And I think he's got a fascinating story. Now, I don't know, you'll never know all the background or what the truth was or what. I mean, I think he was one of the good guys. I think his approach, and I think if they would have stuck with it, I think there could have been a very different conclusion to that. if he would have been allowed to. Maybe I'm all wet. I don't know. I just didn't. I was just curious if you knew him or.
No, and I knew of him, and obviously a lot of what we learned in crisis negotiation had his handprints on it or his fingerprints on it, and very good at what he does and did. Yeah, and unfortunately with that situation, that was one where just it's a powder keg. And
yeah, no doubt about it. It was just yeah. I mean, we could.
And like everything else, sometimes you get it wrong and you have to fix it, right?
Yeah.
Law enforcement's one of those professions. Everything else has an acceptable rate of error, but not law enforcement. They've got to be right 100% of the time, which I think is unfair to the profession.
It is unfair. And I just watched there's a video out where there's an ICE agent apparently had an altercation with some female at the courthouse or something, and her husband is being deported or something. She got in his face and she put her hands up, and it got a little rough. And I watched the whole video, and one thing I'm reminding people of, because I'm pretty hard on law enforcement. I don't like bullies. And I've seen where law enforcement, does things. I'm like, man, you can't be doing that, whatever. However, today we're almost on a war footing here. This is different now. We're in a different time and a different place. And I hope, and I think the Trump administration has made some really good, I don't expect them to be perfect, but I think they've done a lot of really good stuff. And one thing I would remind people of is where we're at today. These ICE officers and people like this, we cannot be Monday morning quarterbacking these guys and gals. We can't do it. And if they even sense that there's danger or they're in danger or anything, they have to have the green light to just do whatever they've got to do to protect themselves. Because I'm sorry, they're being shot at. And I watched this whole thing and go, that guy was not in the wrong. And they did temporarily suspend him, but I only think it was like 24 hours, and they reinstated him, which is good. But the last thing in the world we need to be doing now with these guys is disciplining them for these types of altercations just because there's cameras around.
Well, and I think one of the problems too is the cameras. Hey, cameras are great, but show the whole video. You know what I mean? So that's a angles, so that's one issue. And I think the other issue, what it comes down to, is when you look at law enforcement, especially on the federal level, you're talking about people who agreed to put their lives on the line for other people in their community. They passed written testing. They passed a background check. They passed a polygraph test. They passed a psychological evaluation. They passed a academy. They passed a field training time period. I'm sorry, when the time comes, my benefit of the doubt is going to go to that person. Because I can tell you, a lot of the people who are against law enforcement may not be able to pass any one of those areas that this person had to pass just to get to that job. You know what
You're
I mean?
Absolutely correct. And I warn people, we've got to stand behind these guys right now, because I'm telling you, if they start getting disciplined for, things like this that could go either way, or, man, did she touch him first? We start playing that game where we're at now, we're going to find ourselves having a hard time finding law enforcement
and that's, it's funny. My son was as I mentioned, was just playing football the other night. And I spoke to him. I said, when it comes to football, you've got one of two options. You either hit them or they hit you. And right. I can tell you, it's much more comfortable when you do the hitting as opposed to receiving the hitting. From that standpoint, once a law enforcement officer becomes afraid to do their job, that's when they're going to get hurt. You're
Yep.
going to have a flag draped coffin. You're going to have grieving widows. You're going to have criminals who aren't being prosecuted. You're going to have society suffer. We cannot raise our law, and it's the Ferguson effect, right? We really can't have our law enforcement officers afraid to do their job. And
Amen, brother.
And that second guessing, I think, it's hesitation kills, right? And it's not a euphemism. That's reality.
Well, that's fact.
Yeah,
that is a fact. Yeah, and it will destroy morale. So thank God they reinstated him. He's back at work, but man, oh man, we're in a different day today.
For sure.
And if we don't allow these ICE officers or whoever they are, these federal agents that are protecting us now from, man, we're talking bombs and bullets and people dying now. I mean,
what I've always laughed at too, or I found ironic, is you talk to these people, and what I would love to ask is, the people who are against ICE or against the job that they're doing, when you go to the mall, do you lock your car? Yes, I do. Then you're a hypocrite. And when you go to bed at night, do you lock your house? Yeah. Then you're a hypocrite. So
yeah.
Why do you lock your personal belongings, but we can't lock down our country? Without borders, you cease to exist as a nation. And it's nothing. We wouldn't allow any other country to do that, or we wouldn't have problems with any other country who supported its sovereignty by locking down their own borders, which every other country does. We wouldn't go into France and be able to do the things. Hey, I expect this for free. I expect that for free. I expect you to pay for my health care. I expect you to pay for my college. They'd kick us right out of the country. To me, if your boat is sinking, the first thing you need to do is plug the hole and then start bailing it out. So I think the wall, from my personal point of view, the wall is helping to plug that hole. Now it's time to start bailing out. And I think they're making a good approach where, hey, if you self-deport, you get a chance to come back in.
Yeah,
there are ways of making it work, but I don't think, allowing people to do whatever they want, allowing them to break the laws that you've established as a society, that's not necessarily compassion.
No, it's not compassion at all. It's sure not compassion towards our citizens.
For sure.
Where can somebody get your book? How do they order your book?
Well,
or your books? I'm sorry, book.
The two of them. So both of them. The first one is False Confessions: Rethinking the False Confession Phenomenon. Second one is Salopia: True Story of Love and Resilience. Salopia is S-I-L-O-P-I.
How do you spell that?
S-I-L-O-P-I. Salopia. Okay. Barnes and Noble, Amazon, Defiance Press, anywhere you can find books, you'll find those online. So
perfect. That's awesome, man. You know what? I cannot thank you enough for spending this time with us. Seriously, this has been,
Mark, I can tell you it's been an absolute pleasure dealing with you. It's been an absolute pleasure dealing with Defiance Press. I 100% am sold on what it is you folks are doing, and I wish you continued success in what it is you're doing. And if I can ever be of assistance, please let me know, because I believe you're fighting the good fight. You've got good people there. And if other people are even thinking of writing a book, do it. Look up Defiance Press, because you guys are the real deal. So I thank you for all you've done for helping bring my writing to life.
Well, thank you. It goes both ways, and man, we just really appreciate it. And there's going to be some other times. Believe me, I hope you're going to be available in the future. I'm already thinking about some different. Travis and I are thinking about doing some different panel discussions on different topics and things of that nature in our podcast venue and stuff. And man, I hope you'll be available whenever we do those in the future, because we didn't even scratch the surface. Listen, there are things in your bio that are, hang on one second. There are things in your bio that I'm like, what the psychophysiology, psychophysiological
deception. Yeah,
detection
yeah,
of deception.
yeah.
You've got doctor's degrees, master's degrees. I'm like, whoa, my.
For somebody who
I'm-
never who was too scared to go to college, which you mentioned something earlier, never say never. That's exactly right. For somebody who was scared to death of going to college, I just kept going and going and going. So let that be a lesson to anybody who's listening. Never say never. So.
What the one thing that I thought about when I'm looking at all these different degrees in things like detecting lies and all these different. Your poor kids never had a chance, did they?
We laugh repeatedly. My wife is a psychologist. She's a clinical
Oh my
psychologist,
God.
and their father is a polygraph examiner. So yeah, our kids sell themselves out. I'm hoping so anyway. But yeah, they usually come home. I've got to tell you something. Might as well get it out. So yeah, our kids are.
So you don't do the light bulb. You don't do the light bulb.
I don't have.
Interrogation room.
For years, I told them I can tell whether they're lying by holding their wrist. So if you ever meet my children, please don't give it up because I still think they believe it. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah. So you'd have to talk with them. I don't know how easy it's been growing up here, but they're good boys and we're crazy about them. So hopefully it's good.
Oh, you're blessed. Thank God.
For sure. That is
you're absolutely blessed. Wow.
Without a doubt.
Well, we're going to keep your father in our prayers, and
I appreciate that. Thank you.
What a magnificent life! What an incredible legacy he has in you. I don't know your siblings, but I know that he is proud.
Well, I wouldn't be here without them. So, but thank you. I appreciate it.
It's a blessing, and you are, and we just really appreciate everything that. But thank you so much for coming on.
Of course,
and we really do appreciate it.
I wish you guys much continued success. Keep in touch.
Well, thank you.